Okay, folks, we are live. So for those listening at home, welcome to the Dungeon Musings YouTube channel. My name is Kevin Madison, and I'll be your friendly dungeon muser tonight, because tonight I'm going to be doing a very long overdue channel update. I realized yesterday that, it had been a while since I had done a channel update, and then when I looked at the actual stats for when the last update was posted, it was in December, late December of 2023. So my apologies for the delay in the update, but I'm hoping that when you hear what we have been up to on the channel this year, that you'll excuse my distraction and my lack of attentiveness to providing a timely update. If you'll excuse me for just a moment, I'm going to double check and make sure that the stream is live. It is. All right. So for those who are joining now or later on, I will also answer questions. I'm not sure how many people we'll have in chat today. I tried to announce this ahead of time today to make sure that people had a notification that this was coming. But if there is any questions that come up over the course of the stream, let me know. Post in the chat, and I will try and address those at the end. For this one, what I wanted to do was give an update on what we've played. I wanted to do what I normally do, talk about some of the games that we have played over the last 10 months, and how, in particular, some standouts that I felt were quite good. To give an update of some of the ongoing campaigns on the channel, to talk about games that we have in the near future that we're going to get to the table, and there's some other sundry stuff I want to talk about as well, some tech issues we've had as of late, and some other things like, pickup games and how we approach that. I think longtime viewers or longtime subscribers are aware of our tendency to run pickup games, but we have had some new folks who have joined who may not be aware of the rationale behind those, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the charity plans for next year too. I haven't got them finalized, but I want to share what my idea is, and then see whether folks would be interested in participating in that. So, without any further delay, I'll get into the actual list. So, one of the things I did before I started today is I went and looked at what we had run last year. So, to give an idea in terms of how busy we have been, in the last year, we ran a total of 32 different games all year, and the previous year was around that number or a little bit less. This year, we have run to date 39 different RPGs on the channel, and in part that has been because we have been running in the first part of the year. There was the every 2 weeks for 6 months we were running a different session that was a game selected by one of the donors from the previous years, and that just gave us an opportunity to get a ton of games to the table that I otherwise would not have, including some that are going to show up in my favorites for this list. And it was great. It was exhausting. It was a pace of preparing and running different games that is not tenable for me, which is partly why after I took my vacation in July of this year, we stopped. We were done with all the charity sessions as well, but why I didn't dive back into the same kind of pace of play. It was really, really great to have done. We got so many really cool games for the channel, and so many really memorable and fun sessions, but it's just exhausting to be running the regular games plus prepping a new game every 2 weeks with, a new one-shot idea, although one of them was a two-parter, so why am I complaining? It wasn't all that bad. The games we ran this year so far are Mongoose Conan, Starfinder, D&D 5th Edition, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition, Pathfinder 2nd Edition, Savage Pathfinder, Savage Worlds Supers, Soulbound, Traveler 2nd Edition, Rogue Trader, Godbound, The Elder Scrolls RPG, unofficial, Wrath and Glory, Walking Dead, Dragon Age, Cypher System, West End Star Wars, Imperium Maledictum, Shadowrun 6th Edition, Age of Rebellion, GURPS, 7th Sea 2nd Edition, Cult Divinity Lost, War Stories, Alien the RPG, 1st Edition, now that 2nd Edition is coming, Vampire the Masquerade 5th Edition, Barbarians of Lemuria, Alternity, the Fallout RPG, Marvel Multiversal, Lex Arcana, Conan the Hyborian Age, the new game that's coming up from Monolith that we played their quick start, Homeworld, I ran a 2D20 version of Traveler, but I used Homeworld effectively as the core game for that, D&D 4th edition, Star Trek Adventures 1st edition, Blackbirds, Pathfinder 1st edition, Acton Cthulhu 2D20, and Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition. So that was a lot of games this year. I will say, like, I tend not to dwell on the ones that I didn't enjoy, but there's only one game that really did not live up to what my expectations of it were. Most of the games really impressed me, and I am going to share my favorite of the year that I've run so far, but I'm going to save that for a little bit later. I don't know what the length of this video is going to be, but if past conduct is a predictor of future behavior, then this will probably be a 2-hour, 3-hour video. I'm hoping to keep it to 2 to try and stay on topic, but I'm not sure that's what my strong suit is, keeping things shorter. I will say that the charity session, so what I did before for the charity sessions for this year, for the thank yous for the donors from last year, was to ask them to pick a game, and then I would prep something for that game and run it. And I ran past the ideas I had with most, I think most, if not all of them. And it was really, some of the games that I was asked to run are games that I really would not have, either I'd forgotten they were on my shelf, or I had not got them to the table. I didn't do a count of it, but there's at least, of the 12 or 13 games that we ran that were new, I think at least half of them were games I had never run before, which was really, really cool. The thing that I found really interesting about it too is it forced me to think about not only for how to approach a one-shot for all these different kinds of games and very different types of games. It was really interesting seeing what the players were interested in exploring and being forced to prep something for that. I'm not sure how how folks run their tables at home, but I typically don't ask the players, what campaign do we want to play? It's typically I pitch something, or we prep something and we start playing, and then we, either stick with it or we, set it by the side. The experience of having the players prompt me to prep either a specific game or a specific idea and then select a game that fit that idea was really, really cool. Like, it was very creatively rewarding for me. I found that I was forced to think outside of what I would normally prep, so I really did enjoy that. It's something worth, I don't know if I would necessarily want an entire campaign based that way, because I think our campaigns tend to emerge from past experiences with games, and then we decide we want to spend more time with them. So we don't necessarily plot out like, oh, this is a new game, let's play this for 2 years or however long. So if you haven't done that though with your players, if you're a GM and haven't done that with your players, it's something worth considering, because it was a really, really interesting exercise, even in just hearing what the players are interested in seeing. I will say as well, I'm going to share not only some of my plans for what I've got in the immediate future prepped or like close to table ready, and some other games I have the eye on. For the first time, I'm going to be sharing some of the players' picks, because before my vacation, I talked to some of the players about games that I thought that they would like to see at the table, either again or for the first time. So I've got some of those to talk about as well. So yeah, and we've talked about this before, but while my priority is making sure that the best experience is for the players at the table, which is why sometimes I ignore chat or otherwise, don't respond to things as quickly as I can. On the Discord server, I'm usually pretty quick at responding. On the channel itself, I'm more delayed. I do apologize for that. I am going to try and get better at that in future, but hearing what folks are interested in seeing played too and interacting with, like, that's also something that we like hearing about. It's especially for the players. I know that a lot of them do enjoy spending time in chat and talking to folks about the games that we're playing and things and the events of the different adventures that we're playing. So that's a lot of fun. let's talk about the state of the campaigns. So our ongoing campaigns right now, where we have been playing them in the last little bit, include, let's see here, our Night Below campaign is currently on hiatus because we're playing Blackbirds, but that one will be coming back. We have our Guard campaign on hiatus because we have been down players and people were away for the summer, but we have started playing Soulbound in place of that, and that has been a very surprising game that a lot of the players have responded quite well to, and I've really enjoyed running. Our Traveler campaign is back into its second leg now, the Borderland Run. So the Traveler second edition game is into the second leg of its or second arc of its overall, campaign. So that's really cool. The Spires of Paradar continues on. We are getting close to the confrontation in our latest mystery in that adventure, so that is proving to be a lot of fun as well. Let's see here, alternate Saturdays, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is it is an older game than I expect. I think we're into session 20 at this point, maybe more, and that one has been a lot of fun too. We've made some adjustments for the rules we're choosing to use from that, and we've moved into using some different combat rules that came out in a supplement called Up in Arms, and from just speaking for myself, I'm much more satisfied with those rules than I am with the rules in the core rulebook. I find they move much faster, and they give interesting. I don't know. I'll get into it more when I talk about the game, but the variant rules out of Up in Arms I find are much more what I want out of a play experience from that table. Our Rogue Trader campaign has been this year. We've been playing mostly Imperium Maledictum and Wrath and Glory, because we had 2 extended war stories in that one, but those both were setting up some things on the main setting of Footfall. And last weekend, 2 weekends ago, we returned to playing Rogue Trader once again, and that campaign is proving to be a lot of fun. We've really built out the setting in a way that I haven't done before with war stories. Like, I've run war stories in a lot of different campaigns before, but fleshing out characters that are played by the same players that then feed into the overall campaign itself and are present in the overall campaign is something I have not tried before. So it was really neat seeing all that come together last time, where the players could kind of switch between one of 3 characters to decide how they were going to interact with the story or drive the fiction forward. It was really, really cool. That campaign's a lot of fun. And I'm really enjoying the 40K stuff. We've run a couple of 40K pickups as well, one recently in particular, and it's been really, really fun playing in the 40K world setting. Let's see here, that's Wednesdays, Saturdays, Fridays. Fridays, we have one of our Fridays is our Rogue Trader game. The other Fridays, we switched over recently to a Pathfinder First Edition campaign, a brand new campaign played in a custom setting, using a set of variant rules for it, and that one has also proved to be a lot of fun. There's world building that's going on in that. It sounds so flaky to say that, but we're really the whole setting is coming together as we play, the same way that Paradar did for us in that campaign, and it's been really, really fun. And seeing the P6 variant, which caps the kind of math in the characters at level 6, and then they can develop further feats and so forth over time. That's been a really, really great set of rules at the table. That 6th level for Pathfinder First Edition, with some of the optional rules we're using, I just find it really hits the level of complexity and action that I really want out of this, at least for this specific game. So it's really, really fun. And the players seem to be really into it as well. I'm really enjoying how much the players are enjoying it, going back to that story and expanding out the characters. So our ongoing games, everything is going well. We've had a couple of things that are on hiatus right now. I will say that, for regular viewers, I expect you might know this, but I don't think I've said it ever out loud, but if you see us switch to playing a different game for an extended period, with the exception of in our Night Below campaign, when we switch over to play Star Wars RPG once a year, which we always do in May, Part of the reason for that is sometimes it's because, you know, the campaign, I don't know, has run its course, but typically we will say that we're running something different at that point. But what often happens is that we have scheduling issues where people aren't available for an extended period of time, or, you know, the people who were regularly able to attend, they've had changes in their circumstances, and now the campaign is trickier and a smaller group isn't as suited for the game that we're using. Because of that, rather than, I mean, my approach is always that if I have players who have showed up for something, I'm going to have something to run for them. So, because I hate wasting time, mine and more importantly theirs. But with the ongoing campaigns, because we've got folks who have over the past, you know, almost 9-10 years now, many people have arranged their lives to have those specific times and evenings and whatnot free. I want to make sure that those are rewarded, that they get something out of the bargain they make by setting aside that time. And sometimes what that means is picking something different and running that for a length of time. Sometimes that means that we're not able to get back to the original campaigns because whatever prompted the change is we're not able to get back to it. And when a campaign is well and truly dead, I try to typically record a video about that. But if we are not, you know, if something is on hiatus or we're running something in a slot that we typically reserve for something else, there is likely a reason for that, and it might be something that I'm willing to share on the channel, but it might not be. So just trust that if we are doing something that's a change, obviously, like, you know, we don't, the bargain you as the audience have with us as well is that if we are presenting something and playing something that you're enjoying and we suddenly change that, there's absolutely no obligation for you to continue on with us unless you want to. And but I mentioned the primary obligation that I view is as the game master on the channel is to make sure that the players have something fun to engage with whenever we get together. And that's what has led to some campaigns going on longer hiatuses than others, and some where we've set them aside. It's also, I mean, I think with the particularly long-lived campaigns like Night Below and, I mean, Legacy of the Crystal Shard was running for a long time until our friend Mo passed away, and then that kind of took the steam out of that campaign. But if we all sort of feel that we sometimes need to take a break from a certain game, from a certain campaign, particularly when we reach a big conclusion. And I think that the Rogue Trader campaign is a great example of something where that kind of break or diversion brings you back with real, you know, renewed energy for whatever the underlying game is. And I expect that things are going to be the same with Night Below when we get back to that as well. But the trouble is we've, again, the scheduling issues are challenging, and we would like to be able to carry on with the same group of people and everybody playing, but sometimes life, you know, conspires otherwise. So we, rather than not playing anything or playing a suboptimal game with a much smaller group, we are, you know, likely going to be running something different until we're able to get to that point where we can regularly have a session and certainty that we're going to be able to run that every week. So but that's the primary reason why, if you see me running a pickup, you know, we're starting a half hour late and we start running something different, it's because we weren't able to carry on with the game, but we don't want to waste our time. And the other thing is, the majority, I shouldn't say the majority, all of us on the channel really enjoy a wide variety of games. So we really do like seeing other games at the table. Not everyone necessarily subscribes to my same perspective, which is that you really can't get a good read for a game until you try running it. And obviously running a game does not necessarily mean you're doing it correctly or you're getting the best experience with it. There's a lot of things that can go in, but if you haven't ever tried getting a game to the table, then how would you ever have the opportunity for seeing those unexpected interactions? How would you be able to identify when things have gone wrong with it? Because I've had in the past where I've run a game, I've been able to flag what I did wrong or what went wrong and then gone back to it. But that is one of the reasons that we like getting those games to the table. And while sometimes a lot of the time, I don't try to give a clear resolution at the end of the adventure. Part of the reason for that is because I would always want to have any game as a potential ongoing, and I want to see what it's like to set up games like that. Well, what are the, if someone comes away from a session, particularly a one-shot, and says, God, I can't wait to play that again, or I can't wait to see that again, I know I've done my job, because it's good enough to want to see more. There's definitely a place for individual stories that are like that, but most games that I'm running on the channel are ones that are likely, potentially, something we might run for a more extended period. And as such, I want to see them operate in that atmosphere, in that kind of approach, or with that sensibility, as opposed to trying to write something that is a one-shot where I'm probably going to be hiving off a lot of elements of the setting or the rules or whatever to be able to get the story to function within the time period we have. So that's, I have seen not a fair bit, but a couple questions about, one shots that we're running and whether we're going to run them again. That's sort of the approach. No game, with the exception of, I think, one game on the channel right now, is gone. Like, we won't be getting it back to the table, because I've intentionally chosen that. Every game, you never know. You never know what we're going to be able to get back to, what we're going to be able to explore a little further. You never know what ends up becoming an ongoing campaign, just as it does, I'm sure, at your table. Sometimes you try something, you're like, Jesus, this is great. We should really hold off doing what else we got planned and see what's happening with this. So that's the thing. Tech issues. This is maybe more just on my side, but we had over the last, I don't know, maybe month and a half, we've had some pretty significant tech issues with audio on the channel, and it's only been this past weekend that I finally identified what the issue was with that. And it turned out it was an Intel, like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's some process thing for like managing services. It's apparently, so if you are having, I mentioned this at the stream or on the stream on Sunday, if you're having issues with Zoom or with, your CPU suddenly seizing up a ton of processing power, and you got a device that has an Intel chipset in it, that might be the issue, because apparently the most recent update for Windows has completely fucked that program, so it just randomly starts chewing up the, what do you call it, processing power. And removing it and disabling it on Sunday fixed that problem. Removing it has utterly resolved it. So I know that's not necessarily an issue for everybody, but I am mindful that we had last year, I was an idiot and left my phone too close to the mic. So people who have better hearing than I do heard popping and whatnot. And I discounted that, but from the amount of people who commented on it, it seemed to have interfered with your ability to enjoy, us at the table. And it was frustrating dealing with that audio issue for the couple of weeks that we had to deal with it. So I apologize if A, my frustration affected the play at the table, and B, if it affected your enjoyment, either the audio issues or my frustration at that. It is resolved right now, so I am happy to report that at least that problem is resolved for now. There will be future tech issues, I'm certain, because it is just an inevitable thing with streaming, but the next thing, let's talk about some games maybe next instead of that. So 39 games this year, which was a lot. It was great being able to see so many at the table. And what I've done is I've tried to pick 10. I might have 11. I think it's 10, but I might have slipped one extra one in there of the games that we ran. And I'll go from no particular order other than the last. The last one is going to be my favorite for the year. And I really wanted to distinguish the games themselves from just the play. We have extraordinary players on the table, on the channel. I love running games for all of our roster players. They always give such terrific fodder in terms of role-playing and creativity and whatnot for me to work with. So this is not a matter of me selecting something based on the people who happen to be at the table. I've really tried to think of this in terms of what did I enjoy about the prep, all from my side, all from the selfish behind the screen side. What did I enjoy about the prep? What did I enjoy about the setting? What did I enjoy about the actual running of the session at the table, and how that specifically related to the game rules and how they interacted with the gameplay, not how the players responded to my adventure or to whatever story I wrote. So let's go through some of those first here. So first up is Ryan Vernier's Blackbirds. Blackbirds is what we are running on the Wednesday nights right now in place of Night Below. Blackbirds is a powered by Zweihander game that is driven by, well, the Zweihander system, but has a more heroic tone to it and a more cohesive setting for it. It is one of the most beautiful RPGs I own, and it's such a fun game to write for and to run. It has a level of complexity that I think just it hits precisely kind of my sweet spot in terms of I like me a crunchy game, you know, where there are some interesting decisions to make both on the player side and my side. I like a narrative meta currency. I like when the characters are competent and are able to, you know, be effective at the things that they're supposed to be, you know, good at. And I also like having adversaries that are equal to the competency of the characters, and Blackbirds offers all of that stuff. Incredible dark fantasy setting. The way that the players are able to, or the characters, I should say, have like super special kind of abilities. It's just, I've heard players talk about how much they've enjoyed that. I love how the stats are higher. You know, having run Warhammer Fantasy 2nd Edition previously, where the stats are a little lower, and some of the like Rogue Trader and whatnot, where the stats are a little bit lower, on average about maybe between 5 and 10 lower. It makes such a world of difference when the starting default stats are higher and then you get skill training. Like it makes for much more satisfying, because the dice are going to always do stuff to make life challenging for the players, and you can always scale up to meet the players where they are. And Blackbirds gives you all that stuff. In addition, the way that they have implemented an idea for the game master, or the Fate Weaver in the game, the Fate Weaver being able to spend the narrative meta currency to make the enemies do super cool stuff and evocative and scary stuff is fucking awesome. So players are always getting access to that narrative meta currency so they can get rerolls or whatever else they need. But then it also means that you're going to be able to do really interesting stuff on a limited basis when they face their adversaries. And I think that makes for a really interesting balance of powerful characters, but really treacherous, you know, not treacherous in the betrayal kind of sense, but like perilous gameplay. It's just a fantastic game. We did run a entire Christmas campaign with it a few years back called the Blackbirds of Yule, and it was just a really, really great time. This was my first time running a more extended campaign with it, and it's proven to be just a ton of fun. And lots of runway for your players. So the characters have lots of runway to keep advancing and developing their characters. We've played, I think, 13 or 14 sessions so far, and the players still haven't gone up one tier. They've had stuff that's advanced their characters a long way, so that was a bit of an issue with Zweihander, from what I remember, that your characters leveled up, in my mind, a little too quickly, but this resolves that. I really can't say enough good things about Blackbirds. We have thoroughly enjoyed our time, and I've absolutely loved running this. It's such a great game. Let's see here. Next up, we only ran this once, but Cult Divinity Lost. Cult Divinity Lost, I, this year, chose to use to run a one-shot of pulp horror set in the 1930s in the setting for our Guard campaign, for our superhero campaign. And it is... I'm not a huge well, I shouldn't say, it's not that I'm not a huge fan of. I've run Blades in the Dark before, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse. It's not Powered by the Apocalypse. It's got its own engine, but it is a story game. And I kind of bounced. I liked reading it. I bounced hard off of it at the table. Same thing with Band of Blades. I've not run many of the Powered by the Apocalypse games other than Masks, and those as well. I just have a hard time wrapping my head around. I feel like the rules get in the way of what my play expectation is on the GM side. So that I've not had a great time with, but the City of Mist game was the one that made me think, oh shit, like there's these types of games that I can run. This is the one that is my favorite. I absolutely love running Cult Divinity Lost. It has extreme content in it, so if you're not familiar with the game, there is some material in here that will be too much for some folks. And I don't mean that in a like, I'm more badass than you. I mean, everybody has lines, and if this game happens to be well over, I think by design, a lot of people's lines, including my own. Like there's things in here I wouldn't include in an RPG at the table, but the gameplay is so good. I just love playing this, and I've used it to run in the last 2 years Dark Fantasy on one occasion, and then this Pulp Heroes kind of thing. Like a Hellboy Lobster Johnson inspired kind of session. It's so much fun. If you're not familiar with the Powered by the Apocalypse or story games, it's a game where there's a different way of moving through the fiction than what you do in traditional role-playing games. Players take actions called moves, which will, at the end of it, they will have changed the scene in some way. Cult is a preferential one for me because many of the moves are closer to just codified versions of what you would do in another role-playing game. But what I really like about it is that the adage behind story games is you play to see what happens, and it is one of the things I just thoroughly enjoy about this game. Very easy to prep, very easy to improvise at the table, and always interesting as well. Just really neat outcomes and neat ways the story takes you that you didn't necessarily expect to go. So I really, really like that. That's not to say that you're just, sitting around doing fuck all. Like there's a clear structure to the story in that too. I don't want to make it sound as if you just sit down and be like, so what do you do? And then wait to see what happens. Both the Dark Fantasy one and this most recent Pulp one, they were structured. Like I prepped an adventure the same way I would for any RPG. Just the way that we moved through towards the resolution was a very different way, and it's a way that I absolutely enjoy. If you have found that games like Powered by the Apocalypse or Monster of the Week or any of those other games where there's a bunch of playbooks and whatnot, if you found that you've had difficulty, I don't mean it as if like you should, but like if you found they work for you, and you don't mind the content in Cult, it's worth a look. I genuinely wish they would release a setting for agnostic set of rules for it, because I think they have on their hands a terrific horror RPG. Just with all the other trappings, it's going to be a hard no for just some people. But in any event, I absolutely love running that. Next up, probably not a surprise, Traveler 2nd Edition. Now this one, I thought about whether to include this or not, and I think the reason I was cautioning against including it is because of how little the mechanics intrude on our gameplay, or at least that's the way I thought of it. But if you're not familiar with, why would you not be familiar? If you're a subscriber to this channel, you definitely know what Traveler is. If you don't, go to the Mongoose Publishing website and you can find a primer on it. But the game that we have been playing with Traveler has been the Borderland run, and then which has grown into a wider kind of Pirates of Drinax campaign. The things that I love about this game are, for one, the framework for how you move through the world. It is deceptive how much the rules guide that stuff, like how you do jumps, how you move about the galaxy, how you figure out what you can pick up. And then in particular, if you embrace some of the random elements that are available in not only in the core book, but in some of the supplements, there's just some really, really interesting and unexpected stuff that you can incorporate into structured adventures and make the world feel like just a really rich and vibrant place for people to interact with. And that is the rules as written. Random encounters are rules as written. The core mechanic for task resolution is simple, but even that has a deceptive depth to it with the degrees of success and with the task chain. A really clever thing. I can't remember whether that was introduced prior to Mongoose or not, but I know that both versions of the Mongoose Traveler game, now that I said that, I don't know if it was first edition, but because I didn't run first, I only started with second. But this game just it gives you just everything you need to run a terrific sandbox game. You know, I previously ran a fair bit of like OSR or old school fantasy games, and those are typically, I think, what you think of when you think of sandbox games, where you can go anywhere and do anything and, you know, discover the adventure as you go. I cannot think of a better game. I can think of ones that do a really good job or equally a good job. Forbidden Lands is a great game for sandboxing too, but I can't think of anything better than Traveler. It's a sci-fi setting, so you're doing it in a different way, but sorry, I typically at the end of these things find myself so parched that I am there to get to the end, so I'm going to try and keep my energy level up and my hydration up. But yeah, Traveler, the core mechanic is so deceptively simple and light on its feet and easily kludged. The type of gameplay that it engenders, and, you know, I've said this many times in these types of updates, where the thing that I like about sci-fi, in particular for like harder sci-fi like this, is that sci-fi is about us, right? It's sort of a commentary on humanity and people. You know, they don't have the like mythic quests you see in fantasy games, or, you know, dire prophecies or evil gods or whatnot. It's just folks, and that is such an engaging and different type of gameplay than what I get in a lot of other games. So I love Traveler. It is a underappreciated one because of its simplicity and how much its mechanics and what it has to offer are just things that are part of the setting and part of the gameplay. But man, what a terrific game. Just really, really fun to run. And it's not even saying the life path system, the character generation, gets a lot of play of people saying how much they enjoy that. And that is awesome. But that's not where the real strength of Traveler ends. It is the gameplay and all the different mechanics and subsystems that they've got set up that are so simple that enable or empower, I think, not necessarily enable, but empower the kind of great sandboxy, you know, go where you want type campaign that so few other games offer. So loved it. Next one is actually one I'm trying to think if I've run it more than once this year. I think I've only run it once, but I really enjoyed the session, and that is Frieligan's Alien RPG. Now, this one is I'm pausing because at the time of recording, Alien, they have announced a second edition, and in my mind, it's too soon. Like this game is not at the point where there's a lot of innovations and a lot of developments that have come over with supplements in the course of the first edition's game line, where they're like, shit, like we should have included this in the core book, or, you know, some other fundamental flaw with the game that they needed to address with the second edition. I don't know whether there's a licensing issue that's going on with it. And that has required them to issue a new edition of it. So maybe there's something going on behind the scenes for it. But in my mind, that is the only thing that is diminishing my involvement with it. Is it feels far too soon for a second edition. And from what they've previewed with it, for the second edition, like, it does not seem to justify, like, oh, well, we got a second starter set. And it's like, they've already had, I think, one starter adventure that pairs with a core book plus a starter set that's out. Maybe it's print run issues, I don't know, but it has soured me a bit on this one, because like this feels way too fucking soon for a second edition, particularly for a game that is as strong as what it is. We ran this using an alternate setting. I took the concepts of Alien and adapted it to an Old West setting, and it just gave a really fun and experience at the table. Again, kind of unexpected, but the thing that Free Lagan does better, I think, than any other publisher of licensed games, with the... No, I'm going to say good things about Star Trek Adventure 2nd Edition a little later, but I think that Free Lagan does a better job of capturing the experience of engaging with the inspirational material and giving you that same feeling better than any other licensed RPG. You know, I think that a lot of other RPGs capture how to articulate what's in a setting, but the Free Lagan games, with the way that their stress mechanic works and things like that, or fear mechanics, they just capture an experience at the table that is very much like seeing those films for the first time. And I love those films. So Alien is just a terrific game. Notwithstanding my grousing about the upcoming 2nd edition, I would run Alien again in a second. And I will say too, this is a part of the frustrating thing with it, is that there's a supplement they published that was like colony focused. And I genuinely, like, each of the two kind of, you know, campaign setup books they've published so far. One was the Colonial Marine book, and the other one was the Colony book, and Building Better Worlds it's called. And when it was announced, I was like, well, I'm going to get this because there'll be some stuff in there that I'll like, but I can't imagine ever wanting to play a colonist. Like, the fucking boring. How would you play an ongoing campaign like that? Maybe an adventure. And then, you know, they shut me up with the adventure that's in there being this really cool looking sandbox where you're doing colonization stuff, but there's a great alien focused kind of thread through it. It's just an incredible setup for a campaign. I haven't run it, so I can't say whether it holds together over the course of the campaign. And I'm a little frustrated right now with the 2nd edition, but with how much they surprised me with that, maybe I should have shut my mouth and see what comes from 2nd edition. I did say the same thing about Star Trek Adventures, Star Trek Adventures 1st edition had just finished, feeling like it was wrapping up its line, so why the hell are they releasing a Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition? And the Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition book is incredible. It is, I prefer it to the 1st edition. I feel like they made some huge improvements, so what do I know? Maybe I'll be proven wrong. I don't mind being wrong when it means I get better games. While we're in that vein, again, another one we only ran one time, but the Walking Dead Universe RPG, published again by Free Lagan, gave us one of the most fun single sessions that we have had in a long time. It was just a really terrific single session that felt very much like what the source material was. You're not getting anything beyond a Walking Dead style adventure with this RPG, but you know, this, like, you know, Savage World settings, it has a clear mission statement and it has a clear intent of what it wants to do. And in my mind, it absolutely achieves it. It is such a great game. And again, surprisingly, I think that there's a great deal of lethality in the game, and you would have to have players who are okay with unexpected and sudden deaths of beloved characters, but it really would... It has the bones for an ongoing campaign as well. So this is one of those games that is just, wow, like, look at the size of this thing. So much potential in such a small tome, because so much of it comes from the actual play at the table, right, for that one. Next up, let's see, what do we talk about next? Ooh, this one's probably not a surprise because we have run it a fair bit on the channel, and it's one of our ongoing campaigns right now, and that is Soulbound, the Warhammer Age of Sigmar RPG. Now, this is one that I'd run a couple of times before this year, and I didn't mind it. Like, it was okay, but I didn't quite appreciate what the game mechanics were trying to work for, nor what the teamwork was like in the game. And now we're, I think, like 6 sessions into an ongoing adventure, and we played a complete adventure of it with different characters and different players over Christmas. It's a fantastic game. From the GM side, there's so much creativity in this, so much opportunities for creativity in the setting. Very easy to run out of the book with adversaries and monsters out of the book. There's tons of great ways for the characters to develop and to customize themselves. There's a long runway for character development. There is great rewards that not only the players can find, but they can also build or achieve. There's a terrific kind of downtime system that's built into the game that ties into many of the themes of the game, which is unlike a lot of other Warhammer RPGs. This one is chock full of hope. It's also chock full of terrible monsters and ruinous powers, but those are alongside hope. So I don't know. It's interesting because we've had the couple of players who I have run it for in an ongoing adventure. It seems like almost everybody has either said, wow, this is awesome, I can't wait to play more, or I'm buying this at the end of the session. And there are few games where you can, by just running the game for them, you can have that big of a reaction. And I like the game and I like the setting and I like the source books for it. I didn't have that same kind of over-the-top reaction. So the thing I find intriguing about the game as well is how much players seem to enjoy playing it. And the setting itself, it did take me time to figure out what it is, because the old world is very easy to wrap your head around. 40K is a little easier because there's tons and tons of source material that you can go to and a gazillion YouTube channels with lore and whatnot. Age of Sigmar is much more of a niche thing, but I am glad I spent the time figuring out what the setting is about. And I will say that listening to some short stories, there's a short story collection called Hammer Hall and Other Tales or something like that. And I found listening to a couple of those on audio really helped me figure out like, oh, this is what the setting's about and why our characters excel at that. For a game that you otherwise only really view through a miniature skirmishing game, sometimes that's not enough. And I'm not sure. There's a lot of great stuff in the core book for you getting to the setting, but for me, I needed to get more about like what's a scene on the street like in any city here. How do the various powers interact with one another beyond just fighting and killing? And I found that those short stories really helped wrap my head around what the one way of presenting the world, so I could figure out how I wanted to do that. I just absolutely love Soulbound, and the product line is in a really great place right now where there's tons of great options for running different styles of campaigns. There's a great bestiary out for it. There's 2 mega adventures, 1 campaign, but a couple setting source books, and then some really great supplements. So the game line is in a great place. I really, really love that one. What is up next? We're more than halfway through the list now, my goodness. Did Soulbound. All right, next up, here we go. This one is a bit of a surprise for me, because if you told me this would be a game I'd be running on the channel for an ongoing campaign, I probably would not have believed you a year ago. It's Pathfinder First Edition, and this is largely due to our dabbling with 3.5 last year, and then our I can't remember what prompted me to go back to this for the adventure that we are running currently, or the campaign we're running on Fridays, Last of the Falling Leaves. But I don't know, for whatever reason, I pulled it off the shelf, and I am so glad I did. It is proving to be the perfect game engine for driving the P6 campaign that we're playing. And again, P6, you can find a Google search, or if you go to one of our Last of the Falling Leaves adventures, you can find a link to those rules in the description of those videos. That campaign, like, the thing that I find that I like quite a bit about Pathfinder is like tons of great classes, and beyond what you would expect just from D&D. Pathfinder did a really good job of going into its own kind of area. There's solid math behind all the stuff that doesn't get broken until like 12th level or so. So a 6th level campaign is just great. Tons of magic items, tons of spells, and lots of opportunities to bring a lot of different flavors into a setting that, especially through third-party stuff. Like there's some really great stuff I picked up from Kobold Press that they were publishing before they made the switch over to PF2, and Kobold Press had made the switch to 5th edition largely. It's just a great, it's a good fit for the type of game that we're playing, and there's lots of interesting decisions that the players can make. It's a completed game line as well, which I kind of like. This is one of the reasons I like old school games as well, is that I like when we've got the entire corpus of the game ready to play. It's one of the reasons I've talked before about the Saga system for Star Wars. I love that because we've got the complete game. We know what the definitive word is on it. So if we want to add stuff in, we've got a lot of great material to go from, but we're not waiting for something new to come in that's going to, change the way that our understanding of the game or the setting or whatever is. It's great running live games as well. Like, PF2 is a evolving game and that I'm enjoying adding stuff in, but when you have things like the remastering, that kind of, it disrupts the flow when, or if Alien, with a new edition suddenly being launched, that's close enough to maybe be usable. I don't know. In any event, that Pathfinder 1 has been a ton of fun to work with. By capping the players at level 6 as well, it means that I can build my own adversaries and my own kind of, monsters with levels and use templates and all the sort of tinkering stuff that I used to love doing with D&D 3rd edition and 3.5. But I'm not going to the point where I'm spending hours doing all the math for it. The characters are only level 6, so the level of and complexity of monsters I can work on are going to be capped at a comparable level. So it gives me a chance to kind of indulge in that stuff, but not be overwhelmed by the crunch that is in PF1. It's also, at that level, remarkably easy to fudge at the table. We have been running stuff where I've been using monsters directly out of the book, rather than having to write them up beforehand or write them up separately, and tweaking things on the fly where I'm just like, all right, I remember a template does this, so we're going to add that on. Great stuff. It's been a very fun and liberating campaign, not feeling like I need to run Pathfinder 1st Edition raw, which is a self-imposed thing, but it is something that I've always been thinking of. My thought with Pathfinder 1st Edition in the past has always been that, well, players are going to expect you to run these rules this way, so if you change them, their tinkering with their characters is going to be undermined because they're not getting what they expected. I am not concerned with that any longer, and it's been allowing me to just enjoy the game for what it is, rather than, or what I need it to be, I should say, rather than trying to slavishly run it the way that it is written. Next up is, this one here. Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition. I absolutely love running this game. The changes between so Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition is the one that Fantasy Flight put out that has the kind of funky dice and whatnot. I have had a lot of fun with that game in past. It's impossible to run online using the tools that I use, so Roll20. I think that probably with Foundry or some other things you could probably run that. It's a game that with all the little accessories and cards and whatnot, I love running it in person. I wouldn't bother trying to run it online because it's just not worth the effort, I don't think. I'm knocking my notes all over the place. But with this one, the closest comparator is Warhammer Fantasy 2nd Edition, which we ran for a short campaign about 2 years ago. And we happen to also be running Rogue Trader, which uses a similar kind of D100 base system. The things that I love about this game over those others, the degrees of success and the comparative successes, that is such a great mechanic. Not rolling damage, I absolutely love, and I wish more games did that. Having a fixed damage score that is affected by your level of success is just such a time saver and such a cool way of tying impact to the outcome of your skill check. How many times you got like, I got a 19 on a hit, and then you roll damage and it's shit damage because you're rolling damage separate from that. And unless you get a critical success, it is disconnected from the outcome. That isn't a problem with this game. Your levels of success is translates directly into the impact of whatever you've done in combat, or in skills, or other things as well. There are other games that do that too. Zweihander and Blackbirds and whatnot have their own ways of doing similar things. Traveler has a similar way of doing that. But there's really just something about this, especially with the way talents can add to your degrees of success, that I just love running this game. The setting also is definitely fantasy, which I love running, but it feels like fantasy. I always go back to a story I read that someone had shared on a blog about writing the original Enemy Within adventures, and the instructions they were given was write a D&D adventure as if it was for Call of Cthulhu. And Call of Cthulhu and D&D are probably the two most formative RPGs from my childhood. I ran a ton of Call of Cthulhu when I was in high school, and until like it was college years is when I made the hard transition into storyteller games. But I ran D&D before that, and I just, the idea of capturing the type of adventures that you play where you're doing more than just bashing stuff, and I don't want to, I'm strawmanning D&D to a degree here, but just the feeling that this game has a full set of rules for doing everything from making a card game interesting to the perils associated with slamming back a bunch of beers, compared to combat and the variety of different kind of tactics and whatnot you can do in that. This game, with the addition in particular of the Up in Arms sourcebook and some changes that were made in the Imperial Zoo sourcebook, just make for such a fucking cool game. The characters feel really interesting too. The character generation system is great. The setting is fun and funny as well. And I mean, I'm informing my approach to running the game by the Gotrek and Felix novels, because I've listened to a bunch of them and I absolutely love them. They're so much fun, and in particular, the lesson in those stories, more often than not, you always get a chance to see what's going on the enemy side. And not to take away the agency of the heroes, but the heroes often have the opportunity to triumph because evil is stupid and selfish, and they've done something to try and advance themselves at the expense of their allies or some other thing, and that's what leads to the exposure. Like, if evil was coordinated and got along, they would not see the terrible outcomes. And that's not to say that in the course of the novels, there's some awful outcomes for the heroes, but I think it has me thinking differently about how to expose the players to some of these things, that like the Skaven and the cults and the whatever else. It's just it means where there's more role playing and more investigation. It means that there's lots of opportunities to use skills and engage in parts of the game that don't involve combat, but also have just a super fun combat system to also play. And the miracle system, we have two priests in our campaign, and some of their miracles have been just clutch things for winning fights or for supporting allies. Just a really, really well done game, and the game line is in such a great place right now. Like, they just released the PDF of the Dwarf sourcebook for players. There's a great Orc sourcebook that came out before that. There's a book on Lustria, which we never thought we would see. There is a source book. There's a setting source book for dwarves coming out, and there's also a player-focused and a GM-focused source book for high elves, which again, like, fucking super cool. The game is just expanding out into areas that I did not ever expect to see from a Warhammer Fantasy game too. So not only is the game itself a ton of fun, the players feel like they've got lots of room to advance, so long runway with players. It also feels like it is just it's in a good place where they're adding new stuff on that is stuff I've wanted to see from this type of game, for a Warhammer game, in a very, very long time. So I really love this game, and I love running it. Next is, I've only run this game twice, but those two sessions are two of the best first sessions I've had with RPGs. It felt like settling into a game that I had been running for years in a setting that I knew intimately, and that is Lex Arcana. Now, Lex Arcana is a game I picked up a bit on a whim. It is a fantasy... it's a fantasy Roman Empire setting, but not fantasy in the Tolkien-esque sense. Fantasy in the sense that there is magic that is there. So there's magic, there's monsters and whatnot. There are gods that respond to, prayers and offerings and so forth. But the conceit for the entire game is that you are investigators who are members of a special kind of detachment or unit within the Empire that explores and deals with supernatural threats to the Empire and the people in it. X-Files by way of the Roman Empire is not a wrong way of thinking it. It has some very unconventional mechanics in it that in play feel really fun. Combat is very easy to manage, and the players I've only seen combat once so far, but the player said he really enjoyed it and he felt like he had good decisions to make in it. The source books you've got for the game are great, but in particular there's one called Encyclopedia Arcana, which is like a reference guide for GMs for presenting the Roman Empire. So there's just exceptionally handy things like illustrations of the kind of like traveling houses you would see, or what an apartment would be like, how mail works and the thing. So all those little questions that you might have that you may not want to be going to like a Roman source book or like a Roman like history book or to the internet. It's got all those answers for you, and in a format that is so good. So, and then the gameplay itself just, I don't know, it really was just, it felt like we had been in this world and in this game for such a long time. Our first session, I've mentioned this on obliquely on stream, but it was intended to be a one-shot for one story. And because of the decisions of the players, it went in a totally different direction, and I ended up improvising the entire session. And we still were able to bring it to a conclusion at the end, and it felt like it was the setting and the system that helped me do that. And the panic I would have normally of like seeing the clock tick down, knowing that I need to get this thing, like, we got to land this plane, man. We're running out of runway here. I guess that's a terrible metaphor. You're not running out of runway. Anyway, but you know what I mean. I take it when you've got a limited amount of time, you need to resolve something. With this game, I did not have that. It just felt like, okay, everything's working the way that it should. And the last session we ran was an adaptation of a portion of the Masks of Nyarlathotep adventure for Call of Cthulhu for it. And it was incredible how easy it was to do that, because there's so many similarities in terms of, urbanization and mass communication, or long distance communication and mass communication as well. A lot of the sensibilities we think of as modern, like, they're there in that Roman setting. And the setup as being, tasked investigators, imperial investigators, really gives you the impetus to go and do the investigations and whatnot. So you don't have that question of like, well, why on earth are they doing this stuff? Why are they investigating this stuff? Your characters get cool powers and some other neat things they can do, but it's not overpowering, and it's not... it is not overly magical. It doesn't feel like you're playing D&D, but in a another setting. And the amount of material just in the source book, the core book, is astounding. There's tons and tons of adversaries, great information about the setting and the world. There's more in the source books, obviously, but I really, really, really enjoyed this game. It's one of the best first sessions I've had in really a long time, and it was it's an unexpected one, because I did not, after I read it, I didn't think like, oh god, this is going to be such a great game to run. It was in the course of the play that I realized that, like, my god, like, this really plays to a lot of my sensibilities as a GM. So really great stuff. And last but not least, as far as the favorites from this year, this is my favorite. This is the game that, when I think back, I've enjoyed the character generation. I've enjoyed the playing and prepping for the sessions. I've enjoyed running the game, and it has only gotten better the more I've gotten to know the game. That game is Imperium Maledictum. Imperium Maledictum is the second Warhammer 40,000 RPG that was published by Cubicle 7. I was a little skeptical going into this because, for one, I really love their other game, Wrath and Glory. Wrath and Glory has been a lot of fun to run. I also have a bunch of Fantasy Flight games that are also quite good, like Death Watch and Rogue Trader we have run, and both of those are great games, really, really fun times I've had at the table with them. But this game, it takes a lot of the ideas that made Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition such a great core mechanic and such a great play experience, streamlined many of those, and then set it in a 40K setting with a clear structure for organizing your campaign for who the characters are and what they're doing, but with an enormous amount of flexibility as to what that structure looks like. The way that the game is set up is, by default, you're playing agents who act for some patron, and the patron might be a rogue cat. Like in our case, we used it to tell the tale of some agents. Oh, sorry, I just fucking closed the book in the mic. We use it to tell the story of agents working for House Aquare, the kind of rogue trader house that is associated with all the player characters in our Rogue Trader game. And that was a great default structure, but you can play, agents of Inquisitors. You can play, agents of the Ministratum, the High Lords of Terra. You could be part of the military. You could be part of the criminals. You could be part of what else here? Rogue Trader Dynasty, criminals, the Imperial Fleet. You could be part of the Navy, the military, the Church, the Adeptus Ministorum, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Adeptus Astrotelepathica, if you want to be part of the psychic kind of thing. Just a great amount of flexibility. And then they finally have released the first source book for it in PDF so far, but we've got the player's book for the Inquisition out, and it's awesome. Like, Cubicle 7, I think, is my favorite publisher of RPGs right now. They just, between Soulbound and some of their source books for 5th edition and 4th edition Warhammer Fantasy and Imperium Maledictum and Wrath and Glory, they are just nailing it. The editing on some of their more recent books has been a bit sloppy and has required quite a few updates before they go to print. So that's a bit of them being a victim of their own success, but the source books themselves and what they're doing to expand the lines is just, wow. This game also, it was really great to spend a fair bit of time with just the source book. We've been playing this, I think, since the start of the year. So this was about 5 or 6 months we were playing Imperium Maledictum. Oh, maybe not that long. I can't remember. Maybe it was. In any event, we've been playing it for many months, and it was really great having just the core book out for it right now, because we really got a chance to kind of, look in all the nooks and crannies of the core book to really understand how, or at least have an opportunity to try and understand how all the different rules work. Just like in Warhammer Fantasy 4th, there's one roll resolution, so you make your roll and then also informs how much damage you do. They do a great job of making each weapon feel special. The characters have a lot of interesting things they can do and they can advance. There's great ways that they make, because combat is going to be a part of any 40k game, probably. They give you lots of really cool ways to have even characters who aren't just combat monkeys contribute and do really neat things in the course of the game. Like we saw in particular, the two particularly non-combat characters do really interesting things. And the psychic rules in this are different from any other 40k game where you're pushing up against a warp threshold. You're maintaining a certain warp charge, and from what I understand, that's how the current version of the tabletop game works, as opposed to just like different levels of power you're expressing, which is how the previous RPGs had handled it, including Wrath and Glory. That has been an enormously fun mechanic to see at the table and has led to some really fun outcomes. It also is much easier for me to track and for me to mitigate enemy psychers on the GM side without overwhelming me with paperwork. They have a great balance of using minion rules and so forth, but without making it feel like, you know, like 4th edition does with minions, where like they genuinely aren't people because they're one hit and they're gone. But there's a way of modeling that in here. It has been just an enormous amount of fun to run. I love learning new stuff about it as we were playing. I really am looking forward to running more of this. And if the Inquisitor sourcebook is any indication of what is to come for the line, it's going to be amazing. There's so much great stuff that we're gonna see, I think, from that game. So, Imperium Maledictum, my absolute favorite game I have run this year. It's noticeable that it does not have a space on the calendar as of yet, but I don't know what I would sacrifice in order to make room for that, but it is definitely on the very close to the table kind of thing. So, that is what we have experienced this year. Like I said, a lot of great games, and the other games, there's a bunch of other games that we ran on the channel this year where I, you know, especially for those one-shots where I couldn't wait to get it to the table again. Shadowrun 6th edition is like that. Fallout is like that. Unofficial Elder Scrolls is like that. All just amazing games, but I wanted to restrict myself to just 10 as my favorites and 1 as my absolute favorite, because I don't think I've done that on the channel before, but no, that's probably Pathfinder 2nd edition was often my kind of, you know, desert island game. So that's what we're talking, or that's what we have had. Next, let's talk about long-term player choices and on the back burner right now. Oh, there's one other game. Actually, before I get into that, I want to mention one thing. That'd be, boom, 3rd edition D&D. I have been promising an overview of 3rd and 3.5 for about 2 years now. And I have several white whales in my RPG collection of games I really want to get to the table, and just for whatever reason, they just do not make that overview has become my white whale. Just before I took my holiday, I was very close to sitting down and doing it, but I know it's going to be one of these videos where it is going to be very long, and I want to make sure I am prepared for it. I have an idea of how to approach it from a structural perspective, so that we're not just saying like, this is this book and this is what's in it, and this is this book and this is what's in it, and I'm not getting into the mechanical arguments that, you know, that were a good part of that game's history. What I want to talk about is the essence of that game, which sounds extremely flaky, but I really think I've got there's an approach that I think will be helpful to some folks, and that if no one else, if there's one other person who had the same hang up with it that I did, I'm hoping that will provide a shift in perspective to look at it. I've really made it out to be much bigger than it probably is going to end up being, but that is on the list. I don't know if I'll be able to do it this Christmas, but it is something. The next major overview I'm going to do on the channel is going to be that one. So it is still coming. It is just, you know, I'm continuing to sail around in search of my white whale, which is the scheduling of that. But yeah, I have not forgotten about it, and it is going to be coming at some point. All right, so then we have some folks in chat. So folks in chat, would you tell me, what do you want me to talk about next? Do you want me to talk about the player choices for the games, the things on the immediate back burner that I have, or the things in the far future? I'm gonna have a sip of coffee here. First response I get, I'll go with. So players things, players games, my immediate back burner, or things in the far future. What do we think? Thanks, Hector. All three. We will get to all three in time, but we would have any plans for One Ring and Forbidden Lands. Rogerio, I'm glad you asked about that. I think you may have prompted me to what I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about my back burner first. Here we go. I had someone recently accuse me of enjoying the sound of my own voice as a GM, so I guess going with my GM selections, and then that's fine. But also, if you don't enjoy the sound of your own voice as a GM, fucking, like, you love yourself. You should enjoy that. All right, so these are in no particular order either. These are just games that I actually have been actively working on in the recent past and getting to degrees of, to the point where I have an idea of what I'd like to try with them. Some of these are prompted by more recent things than others. So the first one is actually a game I would not have expected to get back to the table, but I had comments from somebody and questions from somebody on a older session I ran of it. It prompted me to look at the game once again and look at that session. The session was a lot of fun. And then also it ended up being selected for our current mashup, and that game is Greg Stafford's Pendragon. This is the 5.2 game, and I had been looking at the Great Pendragon campaign. And this is a game, I will say, I'm not an Arthur fan. Like, I don't, I have felt that, like, there's certain sort of classic, you know, settings like Alice in Wonderland or King Arthur that I just feel are played out. Like, I don't know what new stuff I've got to say about that kind of thing. And then I played in a session of Pendragon run by our friend Arlen, and then I ran a session of it, and I really enjoyed it. Like the for those who are long-term Pendragon fans, this will be no surprise to you, but it was very, very cool. Not only the clear kind of, the clear structure that is offered by, no, you're knights and you go on quests, you know, as your kind of, the way that you set up the way that the players are going to be interacting with the story, right? Like, they're not like, oh, adventurers in search of a quest. It's clear you're knights, you got to go do things. Like, you got to be proactive, or you're going to be sent towards things. And then the interaction with that, along with the values, or whatever they're called, the things that you roll against, passions that you roll against, was really interesting in play, because it required players to role play out dice results for different things, which was for different things you would normally associate with role-playing sides. So that was really, really cool. And the idea as well of, you know, seasonal or yearly adventures also really appealed. And I read a blog online of someone who had talked about how they approached the Pendragon, the Great Pendragon campaign in particular, and said, like, you know, let's do 5 years worth of Uther, you know, time in the Uther. And then once they started playing, they committed to finishing Uther, and then they ended up playing the whole campaign because it just really started feeding into itself. And I could see how it could do that. I could see how that game could really end up being a emergent, in the campaign mode, an emergent campaign kind of thing, and would also allow so many of the role-playing opportunities that a lot of our players like to do. We like to spend a lot of time fucking around and smelling the roses, right? And that game is all about that in a lot of ways, or at least the adventures that I've read, that seems to be what a lot of them seem to be about, particularly when you're playing the role of years kind of thing. So that really appealed, and I think that because of the way that the Great Pendragon campaign is structured, where there's suggested events, but not like a script you're necessarily following. There's not a series of adventures that have to happen necessarily. There's a lot of freedom to make the game, not only the adventure itself, like the story as it goes through the years, but also your version of Camelot. I really, really like that they say, make it your own. Is it more magical? Is it less magical? Is it, you know, historic? Is it ahistoric? How much you choose to change the setting to fit your sensibilities is seemingly greatly encouraged, and I absolutely love that, because, you know, that allows for me to find a version of the game that I think, or the setting that I think will be interesting. Traveller does the same way too, right? Where it says your version of the Traveller Imperium is different from everybody else's, and that's the absolutely right way to run it. It's cool seeing that Stafford had encouraged the same approach to that, to like make the game what you know, make your version of the Great Pendragon campaign, or the Pendragon game itself, the setting, make it what you want of it. I absolutely love that. So yeah, that one I've got an idea of a short adventure to try, right? And then to see, Because if I got pretty hooked the last time I ran it, and then we just got distracted by other stuff. But that, so Pendragon was something I was working actively on recently. Another one, since you mentioned it, Rogerio, is the One Ring 2nd Edition. So in the last couple of weeks, I can't remember how it was prompted, but I got prompted a video about the Return to Moria video game. And I don't play a huge amount of video games nowadays because I just don't have time, but I do enjoy them, and I find that I have enjoyed a lot of the light survival games. So like Conan Exiles I played, Valheim I played, and I enjoyed both of them. I stalled out on both of those for certain reasons on both of them, but I did enjoy playing them for quite a bit. And Return to Moria is a lot of that, and that's what sort of appealed to me. I'm like, it's a manageable game. It also was a lot cheaper than what other AAA games are. I don't think it's a AAA game technically. It might be a AA. But in any event, the idea of a dwarf in the 4th Age, going into Moria, finding themselves trapped there, and then going and exploring, that sounded cool to me, so I figured I'd give it a go. I have sunk an unreasonable amount of hours into that fucking game so far, and I love it. It is such a fun game. For me, like the combat is fairly facile, so there's not a lot of complexity there. The crafting is not overly complicated either. The resources are pretty readily available, so I'm not finding myself having to look up online where to find things the way that I did in, Conan and Valheim. So if you're a more hardcore survival player, that might not appeal to you, but I really, really enjoyed the game. There's a bit where you are mining and you can choose to break into song. And if you break into song, you run the risk of alerting nearby goblins and orcs, but they sing these very evocative dwarvish songs while you're mining, to the point where earlier this week, I woke up in the morning with one of those fucking songs in my head. But the setting is so well presented for Moria, for a variety of different places. It's gorgeous and varied and feels very much like a city that is full of empty places. And that was what got me thinking about One Ring again. And that's what led me to pick up Moria Through the Doors of Durin. And I had been prepping a fair bit of One Ring 1st Edition before I found a blog entry that I think has convinced me to give 2nd Edition a try. I thought that one of the things that they did away with in 2nd Edition is something called traits for the 1st Edition. And I really love traits, in particular because they gave you a automatic success. If there's something about your backstory or your whatever, whether it's your career or your the type of background you had or what culture you come from, there were certain things that would give you, a hobbit is not going to need to make a roll to identify pipeweed. Like they'll know which, this comes from so-and-so, but this game did away with that. It streamlined a fair bit of things, but the way that they do have them in the game still, they're just called distinguishing features and they function a little differently. But I think I can just wave my hand and treat them the way I treat traits in the other game. And some of the other innovations seem really interesting, and I'm very, very interested in seeing 2nd Edition at the table because I have not run it or played it yet. And it seems like it'll be pretty easy to swap over some other stuff. And if I wanted to use like Darkening of Mirkwood or one of the other bigger campaigns, but this source book, wow, it is incredibly well done. I own the Moria book for Middle-earth role-playing, and I own the Moria book or box set for the Last Unicorn, no, not Last Unicorn, for Decipher. Decipher's version of the Lord of the Rings. And that Decipher one is pretty good. This is better as far as a game product is concerned. It gives you so many ideas for how to incorporate Moria into your game. So many different interesting characters that could serve as story prompts for going in or for people you can encounter in the course of doing it. A really clever way of handling the moving through Moria. This is setting aside the art in it as well. The art is one of those things you're either going to like or you're not going to like. Like if the art isn't for you, it doesn't matter how much I like it, you're not going to like it. But For me, I do enjoy the approach they've taken of this kind of parchment style, you know, to the insides of these pages. And let me see if I can find an example of some cool art in here. Where? Oh, this is pretty neat. So, like, I really like that quite a bit. The sort of, like, you know, pencil shading and rendering, it reminds me a lot of the D&D basic set, the old red box in a way. So maybe that's what speaks to you know, speaks to me. Oh my goodness, and look at that. Ooh. Dude in Spain. So, yeah, One Ring, I think there's a lot of players who really enjoy One Ring among the roster as well. So I think the possibility of getting that back, where to start with that, I don't know. The last time I ran One Ring, maybe not the last time I ran it, but one of the last times I ran an adventure that was set at the start of the Gondorian Kinstrife. And that has been an idea I've wanted to run for years and years and years. So set like well before the War of the Rings, and at a time where there's a very different kind of conflict going on. I really like that as an idea. I don't know if the Rings of Power has kind of ruined me for that idea, just because it does... I don't want to, if you're enjoying that series, all the more power to you. I just found that the sensibilities for me, for some of the decisions in the first season, really felt like it wasn't servicing Tolkien. I loved the first couple of episodes. I love the set design. I love the settings that they're shooting in. It's sort of gorgeous, you know, surprising. The most expensive show ever made is pretty. But one of the things that got me thinking about is how, by me imposing my own sensibilities on the story, which is what I would do with the Kinstrife, I might not be offering up what the players or, you know, viewers might be wanting from a Lord of the Rings style adventure. So fortunately, Moria is set up in a very sandboxy kind of, players make the story what they want. There's a couple of good, like, interlocked adventures or campaigns that are out for second edition as well. But for me, knowing I like that sandboxy kind of quality, that seems really cool. And I've got so many images of Moria in my mind because of playing the Return to Moria. And I might be able to snag some of that concept art for use in a game at the table. I think that... that might be what we might do, is try dabbling with some time in Moria and see how that goes. Let's see here. What next? Let's say in the Arthurian vein. And this one is prompted by two things. This is prompted by, for one, how much fun I had running the Elder Scrolls role-playing game. The Elder Scrolls game, if you're not familiar, is based on it's a fan product, and it is based primarily on the Dark Heresy game mechanics and Mithras. And one of our players as well, Dave, had recently mentioned that he was very into Dark Ages stuff and wanted to know what kind of game he could play, a Dark Ages style adventure, or like Last Kingdom, the Netflix show, or like Vikings, the TV show. And one of the suggestions we had was Mithras. So Mithras, boom. If you're not familiar, is a iteration of RuneQuest, primarily. It's RuneQuest 6th edition, just with a different name. Mithras has a really, really cool Mythic Britain setting book for it. And a source book for Mythic Britain is Logres, the land of the Saxons. And there is a pre-made adventure in this, not written by one of our roster players, but play tested by one of our roster players, and it comes with very high marks. So I, because the mechanics of Mithras are, many of the elements in that are things that I also like about the Elder Scrolls game. It's always been one that I've been looking to get to the table, but I've stumbled on one thing, which is the special effects in the game. But then there's a source book for a related game called Legend. Legend is like 90% or 95% Mythras, but they made a couple changes to make Mythras out of Legend. Legend has a source book for Vikings. I generated a character using that Viking source book with the idea to see whether it would be a good fit for what Dave was asking for. That led me to look closer at Legend, and that led me to click with like, oh, this is how this is something I just didn't recognize before about how game, like combat in particular, works. And it's the same as in Mythras. I finally felt like I had Mythras click for me. And that led me to take a very deep look at this. The adventure, I agree with Graham that the adventure, Graham is the player who playtested it, and the adventure in it is super fucking cool. And Paul Mitchner is the author of this, and he is also the author, I believe, of Liminal, the Wayne Scott fantasy RPG set in the UK. And I'm sure he designed a shit ton of other stuff too, but it's a really cool source book, a really different way to think about Arthurian Britain. And I really like this. In the same way that Pendragon invites you to do something different, this is a bit more of a, you know, nitty-gritty kind of stuff, and it also allows you to incorporate magic a lot more easily if you want to have magic in your setting or in your campaign. That's a lot easier to do in Mythic Britain than it is with Pendragon. I think it's with 6th edition out, you have to go 2 editions back before you get to rules for player characters using magic. So, or you can use stuff from Paladin, I guess, but in any event. Next is a new one. This is something that I'm telling him, Anna says hi to everybody. This is a game that I will tell you, the source material that inspired the RPG is not something I really care about. Like it's the RPG, the game is inspired by Japanese RPGs, or computer RPGs like Final Fantasy or Ogre Battle, or, you know, those types of things. And the game is called Fabula Ultima. And it has a lot of anime art and whatnot, and I don't know if it... I have a feeling I may have had a Amazon delivery here if Anna Banana is going nuts, but it can wait. I over the summer I decided to try and read some things I had not read before when I was on vacation. 2 of those were the entire series of Full Metal Alchemist in the manga, and I read Berserk in the manga as well. Honey. I'm very sorry, folks. I'm gonna have to go and check and see if someone's at the door. 1 sec. Honey, what are you doing? Is someone here? Hold on. Hold on. Oh. Yeah, see. Thank you. All right, very sorry about that, folks. So I have a family that is coming to visit over the holidays, and I ordered 2 folding beds, and they were just delivered tonight. So that is why Anna Banana was going nuts. So I was talking about Fabula Ultima. Here we go. So this game is designed to sort of capture the flavor of those games, of those types of games. But the thing that appealed to me is there's some interesting dice mechanics that are at play in the game. There's some neat ways they introduce into the role-playing game mechanics that are in those types of video games, particularly with resources. Like you have resource points that you spend, and you choose whether those are spent. You choose what kind of resources you have on you based on those spends while you're playing. So if you have like healing potions or mana potions or whatever, you're spending those as you need them, not while you have them. And it's just a neat it's one of the many interesting decisions they've got in the game. The game also offers some really interesting classes. And when you make a character, you build the character off of a combination of 5 levels out of 2 or 3 of those classes. So every character is going to have this neat combo of at least 2 different classes, sometimes 3. And then with some of the source books that have come out, including the techno fantasy setting book and the high fantasy setting book, they add in more careers, so you can make some really interesting characters. And then as you gain levels, what you doing, Anna? You add in either like expand on your existing careers or add new ones in, or classes. And then if you hit level 10 in a class, you get access to kind of like an N tier ability. So like there's also incentive for reaching that point. There's a great degree of there's some great travel mechanics in it, and which are very, you know, kind of light on their feet but interesting outcome. There's also very easy adversary design rules and clear rules for boss battles, as there, you know, should be in something based on a Final Fantasy type fight. And while the art isn't necessarily like, it's not my favorite stuff, I've enjoyed reading those manga. But I mean, like, I still can't get through anime cartoons, really. They're just not for me. There's nothing that prevents you from using these rules to run something that has more, you know, Western or some other kind of sensibility to it, whether more realistic or not. The game mechanics are always going to give it a high action kind of feel, but there's so many neat ideas in here for easily modeling stuff in a game. It seems like the same type of fun play experience that you get out of 4th edition D&D, or 13th Age for that matter, because 13th Age allows a lot more like interpretation and addition to the setting by players. I think this would also offer that too. And I gotta say, I should confess, I'm maybe a little influenced by a really awesome GM screen. This tiny little digest size thing that, you know, folds out nicely with great information on the inside. It's not a skill-based game, so I don't fault it for not having a skill list in here, but it's also really sturdy. Just like it looks like it would be a very... Some games are pick up and play games in the sense that you can pick them up and you can do something because there's just not a lot to the game. This feels like a get playing quick game as opposed to, you know, there's elements in this that might be considered like a beer and pretzels type thing because of sort of the base level of low complexity. But there, I think, is a great deal of complexity that comes from the actual play at the table that would be really rewarding for a game. So this one is on my... you know, when we've got nothing else prepped for a group and I want to get it to the table, that's what I'm going with. I'm really looking forward to seeing what the players do with that game and what they think of it. The last one on my planning plate is, speaking of white whales. So this is one that I've spoken about, I think, in almost every one of my channel updates for... So I think 9th year of doing this. So it's a long time of having this, but that game is Ars Magica. Now, Ars Magica, keen viewers or longtime viewers will notice that the version I'm holding up is the 5th edition, and typically I prefer the 3rd edition of the game. I've nostalgic connections with the 3rd edition of the game as well. The 3rd edition had a more complicated and, in my mind, interesting combat system. In a game that's primarily about medieval wizards, you may wonder why you need to have combat. That's interesting, but there's, you know, in a typical Ars Magica adventure, one person plays the mage and the rest of the people play companions, and then everyone shares the grog characters. That means there's a lot of people who potentially are fighting, and I like having a combat system that has those options for those military types. And it's always been why I've preferred 3rd edition. This past week, I think, or maybe it was last week, they announced the Kickstarter or the crowdfunding on BackerKit for a Ultimate Edition of Ars Magica. It's a very cool campaign. If you want to check it out, go to the Atlas Games website and they'll have a link there. We also have a link to it in the links and commerce section of the Dungeon Musings Discord server. But after that Kickstarter or BackerKit campaign came out, I started looking at my stuff again, and I look in the back of this sourcebook, Lords of Men. Lords of Men sourcebook has a advanced combat rules section, and basically what it does is not only offer everything that was essentially available in the third edition of the game, it expands it with more stuff. Plus, there's great rules for mass combat and a bunch of other stuff. So this version of the game, which does not necessarily streamline, but it simplifies a lot of the more fiddly bits from third edition, like costing skills and so forth, and the variety of skills that they had in third edition, and the way that different advantages would cost different things, all streamlined in this edition. So I am sold, and I have a game ready to go on Roll20 with this one, and an adventure that is a one-shot that I found out of a sourcebook called Hooks for this. So I am very excited. That game has been on my to-run list, man, 30 years maybe, and more. And I have never got it to the table. I can't wait to run that game, and that edition looks fantastic. That exhausts my immediate list, so maybe let's go to the players. So the things that the players had suggested. Agile, thank you so much. That is very, very generous. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. And thanks so much for everybody joining us in chat as well, too. That is awesome. All right, so other things. These are the ones that the players have suggested. Not all of them, because some of the things that the players had suggested or had indicated they wanted to get to the table, I had, I've already got on my list or whatever, but I wanted to mention some of the ones because some of these are ones I had not thought of. One of them, D&D 4th edition. There are quite a few folks in our player roster who are fans of 4th edition, and we had run an adventure set in Dark Sun just before my vacation this year using a D&D 4th edition, and it was pretty fun. It was a pretty fun reminder of what was fun about 4th edition, and in particular, there's a couple players who are quite keen on trying to build characters with it too, because every time we have played 4th edition in the last little while, it's always been with pre-gens, so that's pretty cool. I don't have plans for 4th edition right now, but I'm making sure I keep it on my list of things that players want to get back to the table. Another one, Mage the Ascension. This is the whatever else fancy thing. Let me show you that cover. There we go. Don't drop it, Madison. Whoops, wrong way. There we go. Mage the Ascension is one of my all-time favorites, and I thought, like Ars Magica, that it was a game that only I wanted to play, and when I mentioned it to a couple players, it turns out we've got more fans among the player roster who really love Mage the Ascension who would want to play it. If you're not familiar with Mage the Ascension, it is the third of the White Wolf World of Darkness games that was published. Instead of playing vampires or werewolves, you are playing characters who are able to impose their own subjective view of how reality should work on the wider world. And that is because at its core, the world in Mage is a world of consensus reality. Things work the way they do because people believe that they work that way. So in the original game, there was the big titanic struggle between different forces over what the world would look like. Since I last mentioned this game on the channel, there's also been a release of Victorian Age Mage, which is a really, really cool source book. And there's a great adventure, like a starter adventure for it, that I've got all loaded into Roll20 as well. So this one is likewise ready to go. It's a matter of finding time and, when we're going to do it. I also think that a 30s or 40s Mage game would be really cool as well. But yeah, like knowing now that there are more players who are interested in playing that game rather than, you know, just me wanting to try and find an excuse to convince people to play it, I think there's a better chance of that getting to the table. Another one that we ran about, I think, 3 years ago now, and this is the classic version of that, Rolemaster. Rolemaster Classic. Now, Rolemaster has a new edition that is out right now. I have the first 2 books for it, and I think it is a fine game. I just think that if I'm going to run Rolemaster, I don't know why I wouldn't use Rolemaster Classic, also known as Rolemaster 2nd Edition. If you're not familiar with Rolemaster, it is a game published by a company called Iron Crown Enterprises that started out as a series of kind of supplements to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and AD&D 2nd Edition, and then as sort of like modular things, and they became its own game. There's a very popular version of the first really popular version of a role-playing game for Middle-earth was based off of Rolemaster, but very simplified. And there are other, I've got Against the Dark Master, which is a recreation of MERP, and that one as well. I think it's a really well done game. I just don't know why I wouldn't run Rolemaster 2nd Edition or Rolemaster Classic if I'm going to do that, because those games, that Rolemaster, the new one, Rolemaster Unified, or whatever, it's Unified, I can't remember what it's called, and Against the Dark Master they all have the same issues that I have with running Rolemaster, which is using the tables and the things that take up a lot of time. Because if I'm going to take that stuff and you know, going to be making use of tables and for not only weaponry and criticals and, you know, my movement maneuvers and so forth and static maneuvers, why not just use the one that I already know best and have, you know, the most supplements for and whatnot. We played a game set in Shadow World a couple of years ago, and it was a lot of fun. I think that there was a couple of players who mentioned after the fact that I was surprised had mentioned it as a game they really enjoyed. So it is definitely something that I'm contemplating. What am I talking about? Every like 2 months, I will pull my Rolemaster stuff off the table and off the shelf and poke at it for a bit, and then, you know, put it back on the shelf. But anyway, so Rolemaster. Still a lot of love among the players for Rolemaster. Next one is, so Savage Worlds, we do play a fair bit on the channel, but particularly the players requested Savage Rifts. We've run a couple of sessions of Savage Rifts before, and then a bunch of other Savage Worlds stuff as well. We've played a lot of Supers. We've played Deadlands, Savage Pathfinder, but Savage Rifts is a Savage Worlds version of the classic Palladium Megaversal RPG Rifts, which I loved quite a bit as a kid, but I even as a kid, I found the system to be challenging to use. The Savage Rifts version feels like it. I should say it plays the way I pictured it feeling as a kid. I wanted the game to play. It accommodates the power level quite well, and it's got a couple of source books and mechanics, in particular the Journeys mechanics. Journeys? Travel? I think it's called Journeys, but one of the source books called the... I don't remember the name of the source book. Forgive me. I'll post in chat after, or post in the Discord server in the description of the video later what the game is. But there's one source book, the Expeditionary Guide, maybe Forever, the Tomorrow Legion Expeditionary Guide, I think might be it. It has these rules for Journeys that I like so much. I use them in every version of Savage Worlds I run, where like overland travel is an interesting thing. The players also, like, you get to play really wahoo, high-powered kind of characters, but in a really interesting post-apocalyptic setting. And like a lot of Savage Worlds settings, this one does a great job of giving you a clear mission statement. You're part of the Tomorrow Legion. You're going to be making a better post-apocalypse. There's a lot of really also very clever insights into what the world is and how you present it as a GM that I felt was pretty lacking from the Palladium material. So it's also quite helpful from a GM's perspective, of someone who's just trying to get it to click and figure out what game, what you're going to present the game is like. Otherwise, I mean, yeah, giant robots, alien monsters, other universes, magic users, cyber knights, Borgs. What's not to love about Rifts? All right. Next up is we ran a campaign with this that I really enjoyed, but we didn't get a chance to resolve it. And that is Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition. This is one of the 2 games set in Rokugan that the folks at Fantasy Flight, now Edge Studios, published. And I just love this game. It's a lot of fun to play. It is my favorite version of a Rokugan RPG. And it is my favorite implementation of the Fantasy Flight, proprietary dice, fancy dice mechanic. Sorry, gotta wet my whistle. The way that the game mechanics work in this, it has a roll and keep system, just like previous versions of Rokugan or Five Rings games did. Only you have ring dice and you have skill dice, and then you have different results that from the dice, but they are dramatically streamlined from what the options are in like Star Wars or Warhammer Fantasy. It's one of those games where everybody kind of hunches forward to see what the dice results are like, because they're quite interesting in this. There's only 2 kinds of dice, so it's a little less finicky. And I feel like this game gets that the way that playing samurai drama should be is an empowering thing. I get to play this, not I'm playing a game where I'm saddled with the Code of Bushido. This game rewards you playing up those components of duty and honor and obligation and interpretations of the Code of Bushido and so forth, and the passions of your characters and their the way that conflicts with their duty. All of that is played in a way that makes it interesting for you to engage with them, as opposed to punishing you when you don't. And that's, I feel like, what every other version of the game had done. So between the interesting dice mechanic and the really cool options for characters, I really love this. Although I will say one of the players bounced very hard off of the mechanics in this. They felt that they didn't know what the fuck was going on with it. So I've had both really good encounters and really have not offered the game that the player was looking for with it. So, and the character creation system is awesome. It incorporates the classic 20 rules approach to character design that has been in every version of the Five Rings RPG, only this time you're building the stats for your character and making decisions of where points go and so forth as you're going through those 20 questions. So I just love it. It's also, I think, I don't know for sure, it might be a dead game line too. I think that I'm not sure what else would be missing from the game line at present. It's in a really good state, but I double checked because I was poking at it yesterday. I double checked to see whether there was anything new that had come out for it, because I hadn't seen any word about it. Edge Studios is kind of like Catalyst, where they intentionally try and keep their releases as secretive as possible. So it was possible that I missed this one, but nope, there hasn't been a new book that's come out in about 2 years for this game line, and there's no announcement for any new ones, so it might be a dead line. But really great game, and I was really pleased to see there was players who were keen on getting back to it. Yeah, like I said, it was my favorite game for playing in Rokugan, and my favorite version of the proprietary dice system. Last game, suggested by the players, is Deep Genesis. This is the post-apocalyptic game that was published by Six More Marco, I think. Six More Vodka, I think is what they're called. SMV is the publisher. Marco Jurduk. Jurdovic is the leader, the lead designer on that, which is why I had his name in my mind. If you're not familiar with D-Genesis, you can find the entire game for free on PDFs on the D-Genesis website. It is a absolutely fascinating post-apocalyptic game that takes all of the tropes that you sort of associate with classic post-apocalypse, like, you know, weird religious faiths and mutants and monsters and, you know, exotic, the folks who have turned technology into magic, and like survivalists. All those kind of ideas are there, and then given a very unique twist to them. The setting itself, here's the next thing. It also has some of the most gorgeous art in any RPG. Not for nothing, there are a bunch of graphic designers as well who are behind this, but it's just a really cool setting. And beyond it being an interesting game to run, it is also even if you just read the setting stuff or the source books or whatnot, the way that you learn about the setting, it reminds me a lot of my favorite sort of story building or setting building stuff that was in fiction in a lot of FASA games back in the 90s. So Battletech and Shadowrun used to, you know, teach you about the secrets of the setting through the in-universe chatter and the in-universe stories. And I love that stuff. I loved feeling like I was being you know, if I could steal a line from, or repurpose a line from Planetary, you're kind of being like fictional archaeologists. You're piecing together this pretend world from the fragments rather than just being told about that. D-Genesis is very much like that. I struggled with figuring out what to do with the thing. There are some great, I shouldn't say great. There are some adventures that are out for it that are very compelling stories, but they are very much presented as stories that also happen to have some game mechanics in them. So they are some of the least table-ready adventures of any RPG I have run. They are still fascinating, and there's still some great stuff to be mined from them, but it's a lot of work to get them table-ready. And I don't know, like the game itself, we ran it for one of our marathons not last year, this is years ago. And it was okay. Like the setting itself and the role-playing opportunities for the different factions the characters came from, that was a lot of fun. I don't know if I did the best job. Let me rephrase that. I did a terrible job of presenting the game mechanics, so I might be remembering the game mechanics as poor because I presented them poorly or did not understand them fully. But I remember not being terribly impressed with the game mechanics, but the setting is unlike anything else. I absolutely love the way that they have taken all of those classic kind of Gamma World-esque tropes of post-apocalypse, of Mega Man-esque, you know, things, and made them into this deeply mature and engrossing setting. It's very, very, very fucking cool. I won't spoil anything if you want to explore and learn about the game, because honestly, that has been one of the reasons why it's got its hooks in me, is because of, you have to put that work in to learn it, and then you're like, oh my god, this is, yeah, there's some very, very cool stuff to learn when you start connecting dots and whatnot. It is a game that requires a lot of work on your side to get it table ready, just so the game itself is very much like the adventures, but it left a good enough impression on many of the players where we've had folks who are keen on seeing that one at the table as well. The last category I have is the more far out ones. These are games that are further in the future. And I don't have, oh boy. I've restricted myself here to ones that I haven't even started doing prep for, but I've just got a couple of them. And I framed it that way, but that's actually not true. Some of these are a little more prepared than others. So, what to start with? I'll save this one for last. And then again, if anyone has any questions that they want me to answer about any of the things I've talked about or anything in the channel or otherwise, put it in chat and I'll take a look at that once we're finished up with this pile of books. that are teetering and ready to kill me. Let's start with... Ooh, this one is closest to... Not table ready, but I've got a plan for this for next year. And that is another dark fantasy published by Free League, and that is Symbaroum. So Symbaroum, I have only run one time. Symbaroum is a dark fantasy setting. It's not a post-apocalypse, but it's very close to, I don't know, it's very close to that and owes some similarities. There is a cataclysm that has befallen one kingdom and has required a great deal of mass migration. And as a result of that, there's people coming into a new area, and then there's a mystery that's set up in the default adventure campaigns. The Something of Thrones campaign it's called. Not Thrones, of Thorns. Something of Thorns. It's like a 6 or 7 part adventure, and the game itself has a couple of interesting things about it. Apart from it being a really interesting setting, the GM never rolls dice. It's always the players who roll dice, which I love. It's one of the things I have a hard time getting my head to think about Cypher system properly, but one of the things I really love about Cypher is that the players roll everything. This has that as well, but it's a little more, there's more meat to the system in this one than there is in Cypher. I like the dark fantasy setting of it. I like the relative level of simplicity in the mechanics, but complexity in character generation. There's lots of options for varieties of different characters you can make. There isn't like a class you're playing. You're sort of taking talents and so forth that shape who your character is. The reason I have not got it to the table is, to be frank, I know that I'm not the kind of GM to run long-term campaigns, and an 8-book or 7-book campaign, there's no fucking way I'm going to get through it without screwing it up or changing it or whatever. So the default adventure that is in this, the mega campaign, it's never going to be something I'm going to run. It also, because of certain mysteries being revealed over the course of the campaign that then got baked into some of the expansion core books, I feel like some of the secrets that you would make some of those earlier parts of that campaign satisfying, if you're reading the player's book, if you're reading, whatever, you're going to kind of be exposed to those already. So there's a couple of excuses I had for why I never got this back to the table, but then they announced there's a brand new sourcebook coming out that is for a setting. The default setting for this is north of this kingdom. Is a kingdom called Ambria that fell? Maybe? Anyway, there's the nation that was subject to the cataclysm. Their people went mostly north and kind of west. There's a new sourcebook coming out that is to the east. There's a new sourcebook coming out that's far to the west. And it is a all-in-one thing. There's a city sourcebook. There's a campaign in there, but it's a short one. And it is a brand new kind of place. Has many of the same sensibilities. It is the sister of the ruler from this thing who rules that city, but it looks really good, and it's got a manageable campaign that other people who may play in that campaign will not have read so far. So the plan is if folks want to play in the roster, want to play Symbaroum for that one, I'm committing to running that thing, and if they're giving up reading what the adventure is like, then I'm gonna get that table ready and get it to the table. So Symbaroum is something I want to try in the new year. I always have heard good things about it, and I did enjoy the one session. I think that something that is only like a 4-part or 3-part adventure in a single area with a fixed length, I can manage that without screwing it up. so that is good. Next one is G.I. Joe RPG. So this has, last time when we ran it the first time, there were 2 books out for it. There was a adventure, and there was, there might have only been this adventure, the core book, and the GM screen. Since I last ran this, when we ran it first level, the Cobra books come out. There's been 2 kind of like Forces of the World books that have come out. And most importantly, the Essence Adventure book has come out, which is sort of the crossover advanced rules guide. And the collective... Oh, and there's a tech guide that came out most recently. The tech guide gave great advice on running different eras of Joe. So if you want to play a G.I. Joe game set in the 60s, they tell you how to use these rules and dial back so you can still take advantage of all the cool options in this, but to have it be tech appropriate for the era. The Essence book gave some fantastic advice on more complicated ways of running the game, like more complicated game mechanics, as well as, most importantly, adversary design, which was lacking from here. And then the Cobra source book gave some fantastic options for playing more gray side heroes. And the net effect of all these coming out is just, it's got me very, very excited with this. I also happened to write up some 5th level characters for this game. I realized that my first impression from this suffered from 1st level itis. We played it, characters at 1st level, and like, ugh, this game, without like recognizing it's a level-based game. If you're not familiar with the game, it's a 20 level game. It is a very different mechanic to other like 5th edition games or D20 games. It does use a D20, but there's also a mechanic of like stepping up, stepping down dice that represent your skills and ways of expanding the skills. There's some very clever but easy to manage at the table dice mechanics. Character creation is a lot of fun and modular, so you have a very kind of evocative character to start with. And I mean, like, I don't know, for playing a modern day action kind of thing, I think even if you, I mean, if you're running a G.I. Joe game, you're probably going to want to use the G.I. Joe kind of thing, but you can make that whatever you want. And I got an idea of running a 30s Joe. So like something akin to a, you know, not Diogenes Club, because that's something from Sherlock Holmes, but the Aegis Society from the Adventure RPG from the Trinity line, or something like that, where it's kind of a collection of like, you know, philanthropist adventurers, that but G.I. Joe set in the 30s, I think would be a real fun way to kick the tires on this thing. Never let it be said I won't take a game and intentionally run over something different. I don't have a plan for this right now, but I do know that I really liked running I ran one session of Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed the mechanics. I like the whole vampire shtick about Vampire the Masquerade. I love the clans and the setup and whatnot, and the lore of the setting is so interesting. I'm not crazy about the idea of politicking, of the whole game being about the politicking among the kind of like upper echelon and whatnot. I played once in a live action role playing thing, and for what do you call it, for Vampire, what it's called, Masquerade maybe, whatever the live action version is, and it was just off. I really was not for me. I shouldn't say it's awful. The other people seemed to enjoy themselves. I did not, and that's something I really have not wanted of my vampire game. But this game, this version of it, really does situate the characters in the modern day on a more grounded level. There's a great adventure set in London in like 2008 that gives some really good opportunity. It gives a good structure to playing an ongoing campaign. There's also a new source book out for a brand new setting for it, for a brand new coterie, so a new campaign. And I really enjoyed like the way that the blood rousing and the XP and the speed of play that was afforded by the one session I played of this was really, really good. So I would like to get that. I didn't grab it too, but Hunter the Reckoning, the 5th edition version of that, or the one published by Edge Studios, I like, not Edge, Renegade Press is who's publishing it now. I'd really like to try that as well. Keeping in that mind, this one more so. This one I have a very clear idea of what I want to do with it, and that is Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition. I really, really like this game. I haven't run it yet, so maybe it's going to be awful at the table, but I really enjoyed reading this game before. Mage is probably my favorite of the original World of Darkness games, but Werewolf is a very, very close second, and Werewolf I feel I have a lot easier time getting to the table. I've run a lot more Werewolf than I've run Mage, for that matter, too. The newest version uses the same dice mechanics as in Vampire 5th Edition. They've made some changes to the lore and to the setting. I'm fine with absolutely all of them. I love the streamlining of combat because I want my combat in a Werewolf game to be vicious and quick. I'm skeptical of how the rage rules work for going into Krynos form in this, but I trust that I just am not seeing them at play and would love to see that. This has been on a list of games that I've really wanted to go, and then in the last little bit, or I really wanted to get to the table. In the last couple of months, we have now seen Shattered Nation, the source book for the different tribes in Werewolf come out, and for what it's like being the cultural setup for werewolves. There's a starter adventure called Sent to Decay, which looks awesome. Really, really good job of giving you what you need to have not only a setting, but to customize that setting and then the adventure that'll happen afterwards from it. And my storyteller kit with a fucking badass screen. Look at that. Oof. My goodness. And I really like this screen. It is a skill-based game, and it has a full list of skills and attributes in the game screen. The tendency from a lot of publishers now to make these really durable and hard GM screens, I absolutely support that. Lex Arcana has an incredible screen. All the like G.I. Joe and all the World of Darkness games have fucking great durable screens. Really love that stuff. So I'm fully in support of that trend. Werewolf, I think I'd probably run a Old West thing with, because I like running Old West stuff. There was the classic vampire or werewolf Old West thing, but our player Carl has been talking about doing a werewolf Viking thing, and that's a pretty good idea. It would be kind of neat running a Viking era story playing werewolves, and I think it'd be very easy to do with this game. There's a couple skills that need to be renamed, but that'd be very, very easy to do. And the last one that is in the... Is that it? Am I already through these? Holy smokes. The last one is... This is really the, like, pie in the sky of things, but I'm going to give context for it. So, the players on the player roster very generously for my birthday this year got me a gift certificate to our friends at Noble Knight Games. And I love Noble Knight. I was before they were ever a partner on the channel. We have always, I've always loved purchasing stuff from them. They've been, great for tracking down stuff. And I typically get a lot of RPGs, and I own a lot of RPGs, but I always have rationale behind, like, maybe I'll run these things. I rarely get stuff that I absolutely have no reason to get them other than just, to own them. I use this as an excuse. The generosity of the players for my birthday present was an exception. So I got something that I probably will never end up running, but I really loved the idea of it, and I really wanted to at least have it in the house so I could read it at some point. These are the Transylvania by Night source book, and then the 4 Transylvania Chronicles adventures for Vampire the Masquerade and for Vampire Dark Ages. So those are the 4 source books. I just, from what I understand from reading online, the campaign itself is a bit of a mess, and it requires a substantial amount of reworking to avoid some railroading stuff and some things that don't make sense. But the appeal of having Dracula as a central character in your vampire game, there's a bit of clever advice about the Chocula factor in the start of this Vampire by Night book, where they talk about, like, because Dracula also is such a part of pop culture that, you know, it can kind of have that like goofy quality to it. But one of my favorite source books of all time is the Dracula Dossier by Kenneth Haidt for the Night's Black Agents RPG. And the Dracula in that is a stone cold, terrifying motherfucker. He is a terrifying enemy with enormous reach and influence and threat. And that's always sort of what, in my mind, what Dracula's been like. I for whatever my, you know, whether it's, I saw something when I was a kid when I was, and it had a lasting influence, but I haven't had that goofy kind of like, whoa, whoa, you know. Dracula is a terrifying force of nature in my mind, and having a whole vampire campaign that is historic and goes through the ages, I can't think of a more fun way of organizing that than using Dracula himself as a focus point for that. And the adventures are extremely dense, as is the source book for it. So I've only barely scratched into this, but this is one of those, I genuinely do not think I would ever run the whole thing, knowing what kind of GM I am, knowing what kind of work that would have to go into this, and knowing the niche appeal for that kind of game. But I love it in my mind. I love the idea of what that campaign would be like, which is why it has been routinely shuffled back and forth on my nightstand. Vampire Dark Ages. I purchased the original version of Vampire Dark Ages when I picked up, when it came out, before it became Dark Ages Vampire, and then now back to Vampire the Dark Ages. This was, I liked, like I said, I liked Mage more than any of the other, you know, lines for World of Darkness. I liked Werewolves. Vampire Dark Ages was a very, very close runner-up. I love the idea of running a vampire campaign, but in a historical setting. And the Dark Ages actually makes some, I didn't realize this until I got deeper into the 20th anniversary one. It makes some changes to the storyteller system, to the combat in particular, that I really like. Like, there's things that were in the original version of the storyteller system that, I mean, there's a bunch of different versions of it, and it's been changed with the different versions of the different core game lines. But there's some changes that have been made in the 20th anniversary one that I really like. And I already own the two kind of source books that were out for it. This is another one of those games where for a long time, like, I love the idea of it, and I didn't really have a picture of what I would want to do with the actual games. And then my friends and the player roster got me that awesome gift certificate, and I finally splurged for these, and they are a mess. They're a mess, and there's a lot of stuff to read in it, but there's so many fun and good ideas, I think, in these that, my goodness, even if I never run it as an actual campaign or even get it to the table for a short thing, the amount of joy I get in preparing campaigns anyway makes that work or that mental exercise or whatnot more than worth it, you know. There's always going to be, particularly if you're a dilettante kind of GM who likes running or prepping a bunch of different games, we're never going to have enough time in our lives to run all the games we want to. But there is so much fun in prepping that. There is definitely added value in seeing it at the table, seeing how it's shaped by what the players do, but preparing campaigns and writing out, you know, plans and whatnot, not knowing whether they'll ever run, I love that as much as I do prepping for a game that I am certain is going to get to the table. Getting it to the table is a different kind of fun, but yeah, so that one, that's the only reason I included, even though this is the remotest of remote chances of that ever getting to the table, never mind the channel. It is still included on the list of things I'm thinking about and poking at for the far run, because it's such a cool idea of playing vampire characters whose fates are turning around Dracula across the ages. That is super fucking cool. So anyway, so that brings me through the big list of games and whatnot. I'm gonna go through chat and see if there's any questions that need to be addressed here. Levy, thank you so much for the kind words. That is very kind of you. We will keep on rocking. Hello, can I edit your older Traveler videos? No, you can't, Avatar. Thank you for the offer, but no. I'm on part 7. I love the series. I'd like to do minor editing, remove dead air. No, sorry, Avatar. I appreciate the offer, but we're fine with the way that they are. Let's see here. Agree. Fell in love with it watching Glass Cannon. Oh, great. Well, that's awesome, Avatar. Yeah, and Glass Cannon runs a great, a really, really great channel. Any plans for... So, Rohirrio, you had asked about Forbidden Lands before, and Forbidden Lands had... Forbidden Lands, we ran a couple of sessions with it, and it was really, really good. But what I've landed on is, it is the kind of game that I think needs to be played ideally every week, or at least regularly every 2 weeks with at least one player who's taking good notes. The kind of environmental storytelling that I think that game is so good at, it really falls to the wayside if you're having big gaps in things, because you spend so much time talking about what had happened or what someone missed or whatnot, that, I don't know, I feel like regular tempo with that game would really benefit the play. And if you have big gaps in between, there's stuff that you forget and stuff you're having to look up, and I don't know. That's the reason we don't currently have a place in the schedule where we would regularly be running those games. So it's not, because we don't have that space for it. It feels like running the game as one-offs, or once a month or once every 6 weeks. It's just not a game that benefits well from that kind of thing. So, or at least it isn't optimized for that kind of thing. So I think that that's why we haven't. One Ring, Moria. Oh yeah, the expanded solar rules. I took a look at that, Rohirrio, but I haven't actually read them in detail yet. It looks pretty cool. Mithras is an exceptional game. Agile, thank you very much. That is awesome. That is very cool. You may want to dull the background music. You sound better. Oh, sorry, Agile. Yeah, background music is one of those things that the levels I've got it at right now are the levels that we have in game in particular. I know some people enjoy it, some people don't. So apologies if it's not to your preference, but hopefully it isn't drowning me out. Ars Magica is on backer kit. Yeah, that is. I'm so glad to see that they're doing so well with it too. It's such a cool looking product for the updated one. Make Apocalypse great again. Yeah. Rollmaster United, SMV, Genesis development was discontinued 3 years ago. Yeah, Daryl. So they did. The RPG was discontinued 3 years ago, but then this past year they crowdfunded a game that's set in it. So I don't know. They just sent out like a sampler. If you purchased a substantial amount of product from them at some point, the publisher sent out something on another one of their settings called Orkin. And I don't know what they're planning with that. I expect that they're going to do more board games with the Genesis setting, and that's also pushing the storyline forward. There was more story content in that Clan Wars game that wasn't in the role-playing game. So while the role-playing game line is dead, they still offer it for free on PDF, and they're still going back to the settings. So I don't know what to expect from them. But you're right that they did officially kill the RPG line, but we may see more about it. Be cool to see Symbaroum getting played. Awesome, Kevin, that's great. The review I saw was intriguing for Symbaroum maybe. Let's see what else here. Back to Ars Magica. I had the original Dark Ages. Yeah, Daryl, it's a great supplement. I really love it. Any interest in getting Cyberpunk 2020 or Red? So, dude, I've got Dude Guy. I have both of those. I years ago ran Cyberpunk 2020. I have not run Cyberpunk Red yet. And I'll tell you the primary reasons why. Not because the game, I think, is not good necessarily, but for one, when I do find that I'm going to run a Cyberpunk thing, I'm someone who was always more into Shadowrun than I was into Cyberpunk. So Cyberpunk offers obviously a very different play experience in a different setting than what Shadowrun does. But if I am thinking Cyberpunk stuff, I'm probably going to lean in the direction of Shadowrun, just because I absolutely love Shadowrun. Shadowrun's one of my favorite settings in games, and I really love that. So when I am thinking a Cyberpunk, game, that's sort of where I go. The other thing is we had a Witcher game that was an ongoing campaign for about a year, and The Witcher is not. It's not the same mechanic as what Cyberpunk is, because they've obviously beefed up, melee combat, and combat is very different. It tries to capture the feel of the video games, and for the most part, it's a pretty good game. But there's a couple of really weird outcomes in the game. Like, you can play a doctor in the game, but if you got someone who's got the healing magic, it's really hard to tell why you would ever need a doctor. In it, like, we genuinely struggled trying to figure what the niche was that doctors could occupy. And combat was, like, it was okay. Fights with monsters were really fun. The way monsters were set up was a lot of fun. But combat was okay. Character advancement felt pretty... like, it was wide open, but it was pretty obvious what the kind of optimal decisions were for the game. So I don't know, because Cyberpunk shares at the core the same kind of 1d10 plus modifiers thing, and reading some overview. It wasn't. I didn't read it. It was Seth Skorkowski did a video where he was talking about combat in that, and my reading of it initially was that it was a pretty deadly thing, and that's sort of what his read was, where it's a game that encourages a lot of gunplay and whatnot, but it's exceptionally lethal, so it sort of works against itself in that way, rather than kind of capturing the, like, man, one gunshot will kill you kind of thing. I haven't run it yet, so I can't say whether that's the experience. I guess the final thing I would say too is I don't know enough about the setting of Night City as it occupies right now. And while I started playing Cyberpunk, the video game, I kind of stalled out because it was just, this is not to do with Cyberpunk itself, but the game is one of those games where there's a lot of kind of like muscle memory and ability usage stuff you have to remember. And every time I start playing a game that's like that, I'll get to a certain point where I play for a few hours, and then I'm not able to get back to it for a month, and I come back and I'm like, I don't know how to play this game anymore. And I have to go back and play the tutorial over again. The tutorial in The Witcher 3 is a lot of fun. I didn't mind playing that one over and over again. I didn't love the one in Cyberpunk, so I just sort of knew, like, I'm not going to learn the setting through the video game because I'm not going to spend that much time playing it, and I'm not going to keep playing the tutorial. And the setting, as it's presented in the book, from what I read, it didn't really grab me as much. So it's a long way of saying my own ignorance of the game, my concerns about how The Witcher played, and the fact that Shadowrun occupies such a big place in my memory and my preferences. Those all sort of mitigate against Cyberpunk. So that's just the reason why. It's no fault of the game itself. It's just I've got a bunch of other factors that sort of play into that. So... but thanks for the question. Any other questions then, folks? Looks like not. So then I can wrap this up. So as far as things go for between now and end of year, so we have our ongoing campaigns that I mentioned at the outset of this video. Our Blackbird's adventure is coming to a close. So then we'll be transitioning to something different on our Wednesdays, which will be maybe... we're definitely getting back to Night Below at some point, but again, availability, where people are happy to live and so forth, that will inform that. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be at the end of November that we'll be going back to Night Below, or whether we're doing something different for a little bit, and then the new year going to try and get back to Night Below. But that in any event, that night will continue on, and then we'll be returning to Night Below at some point. And with the 2024 Player's Handbook too, we recently played a one-shot using the Dragonlance adventure that was published for 5th edition. We started playing that with 2024, and it was interesting. I'm interested to see the changes that have come in 2024, the 2024 PHB, to see what that's like at the table. Rogue Trader is going to carry on, with Rogue Trader. Our PF1 campaign is going to carry on. Our Spires of Paradar campaign looks like we'll be getting close to wrapping up our current mystery in time to sort of get ready for our next, and then we'll have our 2 or 3 year overview for that campaign, because that one's getting into its 2nd or 3rd year now as well, maybe even more. The superhero, once we're finished playing Soulbound, we'll be going back to our Savage Superhero game on the other Saturday morning. Our Warhammer Fantasy campaign is Salt, Silver, and Sin is ongoing, so that's going to keep on going. That one we've been really lucky to keep playing every time. And that's the other thing too, is typically when we're playing something different, it's because we haven't reached what we feel is the quorum for that game or for where we left things. If we left things in the middle of a fight, with a campaign that regularly has 4 players of, say, 5 people who play in the campaign normally, and we suddenly have 2 players available and they play the non-combatants, we're probably going to use that session to run something different, rather than force them to go through. And we never role play players' characters when they're not there. But that one's been really good. Ditto for Traveler. In terms of attendance, we've been very fortunate that players have always been there, so we've been pretty much able to carry on with that. We have a fun war story set up for Traveler as well that'll be played with the Expanse RPG. So another thing similar to our 2D20 Traveler that we played earlier this year. We got another one set up, but I'm not going to force that one at all. It'll happen when we happen to be down players, and it'll be ready to go to learn more about what's going on in the Trojan Reach elsewhere through the eyes of some other characters and using different rules than Traveler. But yeah, that campaign it's going to be a lot of fun. We just had some random encounters, a random generation of passengers, and there's a couple in particular that are currently on the ship that should prove to be interesting and hopefully sparks some further trouble and adventure for our travelers, in addition to the job they're actually taking on. But yeah, and then we've got we're playing this weekend the Fallout and Great Pendragon campaign mashup. We have 2 more. Oh, the charity. Shit, I didn't talk about that yet. All right. So we have 2 more charity sessions between now and the end of year. One of them is I've mentioned already, it's going to be a mashup of the Rise of the Rune Lords adventure published for Pathfinder 1st edition. And I'm not going to mention the last one yet. We'll save that for a surprise, but once those are done, so the last couple of years, the things that seem to have had the most engagement from the players and from the donors when we have not had prizes, because we had before done prizes and whatnot, and I just became awful with getting those out. So I was sending them 6 months late and more in some cases. And it also was a lot of work on my side to continually follow up with people to try and get donations for the prizes for those things. So we stopped doing that. 2 years ago, not this past year, but the year before, we ran the Year of Ill Omens campaign. And what that was, if you didn't see it, was a 6-part adventure where it was one story that ran across 6 different eras for 6 different groups of heroes using 6 different RPGs. And the story concluded at the end, but we went all across space and time for the course of those adventures, with the donors voting on the different ways to affect that and to make selections for what game to use and what era to play in and what kind of heroes we were playing. And it worked out really well. It was a lot of work, but it was a very, very, very gratifying campaign. It was an idea I've had for years and did not have an excuse to run, and it worked out really, really well. This past year, we did, for the first half of the year, a bunch of thank you sessions for people who donated as replacements because we didn't have prizes this year. And that was a great opportunity to play a lot of games, but I don't know if that was really rewarding anybody who donated this year. for the folks who donated this year, we've had these mashup games, and it does not seem like it has encouraged a lot of new donations with it. So for this idea, maybe it's because halfway through the year, it may not be an interesting pitch for people. Maybe the adventures I'm picking are not ideal, but who knows? In any event, it doesn't seem to be a particular. If our goal is to raise money for the charity we are partnered with, it's not achieving that goal. So what I thought for next year, and I don't have particulars of this yet, so the idea is in a very embryonic state, but we have seen players or donors who have been voting on stuff at the table that went to, voting on stuff that's going to affect what's going into the actual session. What I'm thinking is maybe doing a way of having, and I don't yet know how to do this, but to have a way of incorporating people being able to run things at their home for their own groups, and having that affect the course of a charity adventure or campaign. So maybe it's that adventures that are happening elsewhere in the world, the donors can share what's happened in their groups to affect the world or change the world, and then that helps set up the challenges for the adventures. Or perhaps we play through our session, and then in the 2 months in between, it gives the people, the donors, to either vote on what happened or run for their own group, and then say what the outcome was. And what I would do is, I guess, set up some kind of significant event that we don't know about at the end of our session for your groups to resolve, and then bring it back in. That would require, I think, picking one kind of setting and one kind of game for it, in which case it's difficult to pick what game. If we could use D&D 5th edition, but I mean, I don't know. I think that's just playing into the idea that it's the biggest game, and we while we are running 5th edition by no means represents the most significant game we run on the channel. So there are other games you can access for free, like PF1 or PF2, or other games like that we have run on the channel quite a bit, like AD&D 2nd edition. Maybe those might be options for the game, but I'm thinking that it would be a way so that because I know we have a great deal of players on the channel. We also have a lot of GMs and DMs in the audience. That might give a way of having you involve your players or your table, whether for a one-shot or whatever, to feed into that overall narrative. The reason I'm thinking of is because they used to do this thing in Legend of the Five Rings where the outcome of tournaments would dictate what was happening in the story of the early arcs of the story in Legend of the Five Rings, and I thought it'd be neat to do something like that. Right now, obviously, it is in a very rough and embryonic state, but if that's something that would appeal to folks, to be able to donate that to donate 25. I think 25 is usually the threshold that we have. Donate $25, then you can submit your results for it. Whether that would be something that would be of interest. That would allow us to do a year-long campaign as well. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of ways that are that give the donors an opportunity to participate in what's going on in those sessions, more so than just like giving a seat to it, because we used to do that, and that is challenging. It's challenging because of when I'm writing for folks that I've played with before, it's very easy to know what to do and what to write for them. For folks who I've not met before, who, are coming in, it's a lot more challenging to do that. We fortunately had great outcomes for all the charity sessions beforehand, but I think that, I don't know. I'm not crazy about that as an option, again, because it is an enormous amount of time requirement on my part too, to write for someone who I don't know, and I don't know what their expectations are. So in any event, but I'm interested to hear what folks think of that idea, of there kind of being a collective, many parties determining the outcome of the story as we go through that year's worth of sessions. Yeah. So that's the idea I've got right now. Another change up to see what what hits and what connects. So that is that. We want to see werewolves in a Western. If you want werewolves in a Western, do Weird Frontiers. I actually have Weird Frontiers, Daryl, and I like it, but I'm not... DCC just doesn't grab me. I think that it's a neat system, and I can see why it appeals to folks. It has not yet grabbed me. I did back the Purple Planet Kickstarter, though, so that will be... I'm going to definitely get at least one of those adventures to the table, because that kind of planetary romance stuff I absolutely love, and I am going to give it a try again. But right now, so far, it hasn't really got its teeth in me. So when I am thinking of Weird West, I'm usually going Deadwood or Deadlands, or Werewolf Wild West, or what do you call it? Down Darker Trails for Call of Cthulhu. But anyway, that I think brings us... I don't know how long we've been yapping here. Quite a while. That brings us, I guess, to the end. I will say, once again, as always, a huge thank you to everyone who has joined us at the table, on stream, afterwards, on the Discord server, posting on the channel, sending me emails. I have some emails I need to respond to that I have not done, and some DMs on the Discord server. My apologies for the delay in responding to those. I do intend to get to. I also intend to be more diligent in providing channel updates as well. I used to do them every quarter and then just fell out of the habit. And this year has been 39 games, is 7 more than we ran all year last year. And I think we hit that number around... we exceeded the number of games we ran all year by my vacation in July this year. So, and we've got more we're adding to the list, but I'm excited for what we've got, not only the ongoing campaigns, but some other stuff to come. I always appreciate as well the folks who tell me about games that I did not know about before. The Fabula Ultima in particular, Graham had tweaked me to it as well, but I'm really glad to have found that game now too. It looks very, very cool. As is always the case as well. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns regarding the session, I guess the overview, the state of the channel, or any of the games that I talked about, please don't hesitate to leave a comment in the comment section down below, and I'll endeavor to reply in a timely fashion. There's also a link down below to the Dungeon Musings Discord server where I am active, and we have channels that are dedicated to many of the games that I've talked about on the channel today, as well as many of the games we have upcoming. It's also I am most active on the Discord server, so if you do want to get in touch with me, or if you have any questions, that's usually the best way to reach me, usually through one of the open channels. I have currently sitting 2 messages in DMs that were sent as like I gotta accept the friend kind of thing, and I don't care, I don't mind doing that whatsoever. It's just that when it is in one of the channels, in a public channel, I'm much more inclined to respond to that directly than I am for a more substantive response. And you're also more likely to get great responses from members of the community, whether from the player roster or other folks who are on the community. So, and there is a wealth of knowledge that those folks have. So that's often also why I prefer to respond in a public forum, especially if it's questions that are commonly asked or come up. But in any event, you can still also DM me. Just I will be probably not as quick in responding to that. There's also, I still don't have an update. I had a very busy start to the week, so I still don't have an update for the discount code for Noble Knight, but I will do that. Send that email as soon as I finish this tonight. And there was also a link down below to the Heroes Save Villages campaign, the charity fundraising for the SOS Children's Villages International Charity. We have 2 more mashup sessions between now and the end of year. Hopefully those will be some fun options. And then again, if you have thoughts on the charity ideas for next year, I am always open to suggestions for that. Anything that would be of greater appeal to folks who are interested in donating to the SOS Children's Villages International Charity, I'm happy to consider ways to try and increase the donations to that charity. So last thing I'll say is a solid thank you to all the folks who joined me in chat today and the great questions I got as well. Thank you very much, everybody. As is always the case, well, I hope we gave you a few hours to take your mind off the troubles of our world and think about the, not troubles, but the opportunity and the fun that we're having on the channel and will have to come. And until we see you again, stay safe, stay healthy, and happy gaming.